Hello there, Happy New Year, and welcome to the Podcast Growth Summit by Captivate and the wonderful team at Adobe. My name is Mark Asquith. I'm the co-founder here at Captivate, and oh my word, have we got a lineup for you. We're going to go deep into growth. We're going to talk about starting a podcast. We're going to talk about what it takes to grow a podcast. We're going to talk about how to produce the best podcast that you possibly can. And of course, it's 2025. Why would we not talk about AI? Now, my camera's just decided that it's unplugged itself, which is clearly not true. But I am still here. It is what it is. You've just got to roll with the punches on a gig like this. So, Happy New Year to everyone. We are live, and please do not say any naughty words, everyone. We're going to say hello to a few people, and then I'm going to bring on the wonderful Harmony from Adobe to talk about the event proper. We're going to let people just filter in as we're talking. So we've got the wonderful Kipper McGee. Good to see you. Happy New Year, my friend, long-time Captivate user. We've got, of course, Danny Brown. How could we not have Danny Brown on our wonderful head of podcaster support and experience? We've got Lois from Stockholm in Sweden. This is fantastic. We've got Sadaf from wet and wintry Liverpool. I'm over in Manchester, near Manchester, mate. Yes, I can completely understand that. We are wet and cold as well. Not like Jesse in San Diego, which I think is where Harmony is as well. We've got True Home Confessions from a windy Los Angeles. Dave in Miami. Vincent from Kansas. And Hebden Bridge. Big old Ant. The award winner that is Ant McGinley. Hey, my camera's back. Hey, should have had a shave. Ant McGinley won an independent podcast award for his wrestling podcast. And actually, it's fantastic. I was one of the judges for that. And I absolutely had no idea it was his podcast. I knew he did a wrestling podcast, but I was one of the judges. And then he came up on stage. I was like, you've got to be kidding. This looks like base nepotism, doesn't it? But here he is, and he ripped his shirt off on stage. I kid you not. Try and get the video. Well deserved. If anyone knows how to grow a successful podcast, it is Ant McGinley. Good to see you. Grey Hair Dave will be in Orlando next week. And then hailing from New York is Kimberly, which is where Harmony says a lot of the Adobe team is. Now, I'm going to bring on Harmony in a second, but I'm just going to look and talk through some of this scheduling. We've got an absolutely beautiful schedule for you. It's absolutely, it really is. It's one of those kind of events where you think to yourself, where was this a few years ago when I needed it? It was one of those where, you used to kind of flounder around a little bit and sort of, there was everyone giving advice and people giving different types of advice and, who should you listen to? Who shouldn't you listen to? And events like this weren't really that common. So when the team at Adobe came to us to Captivate and said, look, guys, we think we could probably do something together. We obviously, you jump at the chance. We've got 3 experts and me finishing things up. So we're going to talk through everything that we're going through in a second. We are going to talk about some of the housekeeping. We're going to talk about some of the other fun stuff, the Q&A, the questions, and so on, because we are supported by our wonderful Captivate team. But without further ado, I should bring on the marvelous Harmony. Hello there.
Hey, Mark.
Happy New Year once again.
Happy New Year. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Do you know I had pneumonia over Christmas?
Oh my gosh.
I know, right? Which I thought like that was reserved for older people. I mean, I'm knocking on a little bit, but I thought it was reserved for like older people.
Right.
And so I'm just getting over that, thank you. But it's good to be back. It's good to be back. And I'm not jealous that you're in San Diego in the sun at all. So let's just not mention.
Well, you sound really great for just coming off of pneumonia. Usually the voice is like recovering. So you're sounding really crisp.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. It's well trained in the art of pushing through for podcasts, as we all do. Who else have we got on here? Let's do some housekeeping in a sec. We've got Laurie. Hello, Laurie. Long time no see.
Welcome.
We've got David. And, hang on a minute. I don't know if you know this, actually, Harmony.
What's that?
But we do have, I sort of don't really want to mention it, but we do have the head of the Danny Brown fan club.
Welcome. Oh my goodness.
So,
hello.
Danny's delivering. He's giving you the t-shirts. He's giving you the bold cap so that you can look like Danny. Hope he's doing it. If he's not, we need to be having questions. Harmony, talk us through what we've got in store today, because it's a fantastic lineup and I'm super excited for it.
Absolutely. Well, and first off, I just want to say our team at Adobe Podcast is thrilled to be partnering with you and the team at Captivate, Mark. We're super excited to be collaborating and hope for some future endeavors as well. We've got a packed 2 hours with 4 leading industry experts. We're going to be kicking it off with Dave Jackson from School of Podcasting and head of podcasting at Podpage. He's going to tell us everything we need to know about starting a podcast. So if you're just starting out, what are the key elements you should be focusing on when conceptualizing a podcast and getting started? And then quick after, we're going to pass it over to Hari to talk about remote recording. There's so much goodness here when it comes to remote recording. What are some of the best practices for ensuring high quality audio when conducting remote recordings? How to effectively manage and coordinate with guests? And what are the benefits of using remote recording platforms? And then we'll kick it over to Lauren, founder of Tink Media and editor of Podcast the Newsletter. I've had the pleasure of meeting Lauren at Podcast Movement in the past, and she is such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to effective strategies for growing a podcast audience. And so she's going to walk us through that. And then Mark, we're gonna bring it back to you at the end to talk about AI and podcasting. There's so much going on. This is such an interesting time for AI and podcasting and everything that's being developed right now. So I'm sure that'll spark a lot of spicy questions towards the end. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, I can't wait for the spice. I've got the death slot as well. When everyone's thinking, I'm tired of listening to people talking now. Let's bring the rambling Englishman straight back on. That'll definitely do it. So I'm excited for that. But hey, look, these events really are fantastic. I remember starting our first business podcast websites. This will interest you, Dave, actually 10 years ago next month. It was an endeavor that we took alongside an agency that we were running. And it catapulted my thought process into podcasting on the back of Gary, who's doing, he's going to be doing some of the event work with us. I'm going to bring him on in a little bit. He forced me into podcasting. So sort of, it's weird to see that here we are with Adobe. We've all used Adobe Audition. It's a huge platform. I'm a Photoshop user for years, as Gaz will tell you, fantastic at it. And it's weird that here we are 10 years later and Adobe are doing such great work in podcasting when 10 years ago, like who would have thought that such an amazing brand would be so dedicated to podcasting? So what's going on with Adobe in podcasting? What are you up to? What have you got? What are you working on? Because the tools are absolutely unreal.
Yeah, so we're really focused on audio. We've seen that there are a number of people that are getting started in the field, and it's overwhelming with all of the tools out there. And so our goal is to just make a very simple, easy to use, frictionless tool, so that people can tell their story without getting bogged down by the technology. So in short, Adobe Podcast, it's an AI-powered audio recording and editing tool designed to help podcasters and content creators create high-quality audio. That's the gist of it. So there's a lot of great tools infused to it. We just launched our Enhanced Speech V2 feature, which allows for background noise removal and echo cancellation. So we're super excited for people to be trying that out, getting a lot of feedback, making some improvements to it and iterating on it. So yeah, it's a super exciting time.
I love that. And that is a great tool. There's so many times I do a bit of sort of on the road recording as a podcaster. And there's so many times that you get wind noise or you get some echo because you're in a big reverb room. And it has been difficult without being an audio engineer. It's been difficult to try and make that audio usable. So what I love is that people, these amazing businesses and amazing teams like you have Harmony at Adobe are tackling genuine issues that creators will come up against every single day. And it's one of those, I feel like it's one of those scenarios where when you need it, you're desperate for it and it works and you're a fan for life. And as someone that builds software, I'm just a huge fan of that. So I applaud that so much. So really excited for that one. And you're going to be at Podfest
We're going to be at
next
week. Jay and I will be there from the team along with Sam, our lead designer. So we're thrilled to be there. It'll be our first event that we're attending. And on the flip side too, I think, for beginner podcasters, the exciting thing too is that you also have access to Adobe Express too, which allows you to create things like podcast cover art And for me, someone who's not a designer at all, I can just slap on a template, make some customizations, and it's easy peasy. So really love that that's on the kind of on the flip side of it.
I love that, and our first speaker today will no doubt talk about the barrier to entry being a little different these days when it comes to podcasting. It is tools like Adobe that are making things so much easier. And for anyone that doesn't know, Captivate is a hosting platform. We host, we distribute, we monetize, we give you your download analytics, and we're really focused on growth. We always make a promise: anything that we release will be focused on helping you to make money, or save you time, which is why we call ourselves the only growth-oriented podcast hosting platform with integrated guest booking, integrated AI, integrated dynamic show notes. Everything you need to run and manage your podcast is Captivate. But this is not a marketing event. So, Harmony, should we bring on one of the finest people in podcasting right now? Should we bring him on 3 minutes early? Are we allowed?
I think Dave's got so much to share with the group. So I think let's bring on Dave.
All right, let's bring on Dave. So for anyone that doesn't know Dave, this is a personal introduction. I've known Dave for 10 years now, and when I got into podcasting, it was a weird sort of environment. It was a little bit closed door. There was some people that were working in it that were a little, didn't like new people coming in, and now we're all friends, and we've been doing it for that long. And Dave was one of those people that always welcomed people with open arms. He made myself and Kieran, my co-founder, feel extremely welcome. He's a fantastic, fantastic guitar player, a wonderful friend, and one of the best podcasting educators in the entire world. So without further ado, I'm going to show up. I'm going to bring on the man, the myth, the legend that is Mr. Dave Jackson. Hello.
Oh, you're making me blush.
Yeah.
All deserved, my friend, I assure you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
it has been a while.
It has been a while. So what are you gonna talk to our wonderful audience about today, sir?
We're going to talk about getting started in the right direction. And we kind of have a situation sometimes where we get so passionate about our subject that we just jump in. And then later, 5 episodes in, you go, oh, yeah, I probably should have thought about that. And then, oh, yeah, I didn't. Ooh, so we want to help you avoid the, shouldn't have done that situation.
I love that. Well, we're excited for it. Harmony, we will catch up later, but for now, it's over to Mr. Dave Jackson.
Thank you so much. I do want to hit one thing. I'm going to throw a tangent right at the beginning. I'm so tired of hearing people say, I would start a podcast, but me and technology, we're just not friends. That's just the way I am. Stop it. Stop limiting your creativity and what you can do with your voice because your brain is stopping you. Just stop it, because there was a time when you didn't know how to tie your shoes, and now you can. And then there was a time, I remember the first time I was driving, my dad had this big giant car, and I always swear I was on the sidewalk, but you got it down. And then you learned how to program the VCR, and you learned how to send a fax machine, and you learned how to send email. And there was a time you had a flip phone, and now look at you, you got a smartphone. Quit telling yourself that I would do it, but me and technology are not friends. That's everything is hard until it's not. And, Mark just said it, with tools like Adobe and all the online recording tools we're going to hear about today, it's so easy. So stop it. The world wants to hear you. Don't stop yourself. So let's get into it. What do we need to do when we're starting our podcast? There are a couple things that you need to ask. And again, sometimes we just jump in, and I get that. And that's a good thing that you have all this passion, but you need to answer some questions first. And so the first one is why? Why are you starting a podcast? And if the answer is, I don't know, it seems cool. Not the greatest of reasons, but it's a reason, no shame here. But it could be things like, I want to position myself as an expert. I want to reach a global audience. I want to build a bridge between my customers and my future customers. I'm trying to get some exposure, but I can't get anybody's attention from the mainstream media. These are all reasons why you might want to do it. Or how about this one? I had one guy that contacted me, said, I want to start a podcast about comic books. And he goes, I know there's already 8 million of these. He goes, but my family has said, we're not talking about Batman anymore at the dinner table. We're just done with Batman. And I was like, how dare you? But, and so the guy said, I just want to talk about Batman. And that's what he does. His show is extremely successful. I don't know if he makes a dime, but it's successful because he's talking about Batman, because that's what he wanted to do. And so you need to know your why, because if you don't get your why, you're going to burn out. You're going to burn out because you're like, well, I was hoping to get this, but then you need to know your who. And that one has to be crystal clear. Who is this for? And if you go, I don't know, guys between 25 and 50, there's complete, like a 25-year-old male and a 50-year-old male, trust me, way different. And even if you go, well, I think I'll do a show for widows. And you're like, okay. But even that, if you think about it, there's, let's say Jill, the widow at 37, because unfortunately her spouse was in a car accident. And then there's Mildred, who lost, Marvin at age 102. There's still a big difference. So that if you do the episode on like, hey, ladies, let's talk about getting back out there. I mean, Mildred had her wild streak back in the day, but I'm not sure, that's her thing. So you need to know your who. And the hard part, yes, I said it, podcasting can be kind of hard. My favorite quote, Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs, he's a football player, and he said, podcasting is harder than football. And what you have to do is figure out, okay, why am I doing this? Who is it for? And where those overlap, that's your what. What can I talk about that's going to either educate or entertain the who so that they stick around and hopefully tell a friend while moving them towards my why? Because if I don't get the why, I'm going to burn out. So you need to know your what. And then how are you going to measure your success? And I know a lot of people are like, duh, downloads, right? Well, not always. I'll give you an example. Me, right now, we're in the middle of what I call podcast season, because everybody's like, oh, this is the year. I'm starting a podcast today. This is the year. I thought about it in 2024. 2025 is the year we're doing a podcast. So my download numbers go through the roof, right? Just, it's amazing. I love it. It's great. But I have a membership site. And my why is I want you to sign up for my membership site where I teach you how to podcast. Now, that's great. So the numbers go up in January. And if I was basing my success and my, oh, look at this on my downloads, I'd be ecstatic, but I don't. I base my success on how many people signed up for my membership site. Well, February, much like every gym in America, the numbers go down, right? Everybody's like, I thought I was going to do this. This is a little harder than I thought. And they bail out. That's where you hear a lot of people will do 5 or 6, maybe 7 episodes. And they're like, I'm not on Jimmy Fallon yet. And they quit. And so my download numbers go down, but my membership numbers go up. So because I base my success on how many people sign up in January, yeah, I'm happy. If in February I based my success on downloads, I'd be ready to jump off a bridge because the numbers are but I base my success on my membership. And consequently, since those are going up, I'm really happy in February. So just realize there are more ways to measure success than downloads. Maybe it's speaking gigs. Maybe it's book deals. Maybe it's growing your network. I know a lot of people that simply start a podcast because they want to talk to people in their industry. And if they went to them and sent them an email, like, hi, I'm Dave. I think you're great. I would love to have coffee with you. They'd be like, get out of here, kid. You bother me. But if you go, hi, I'm Dave. I'm the host and producer of the blah, blah, blah podcast. I think you're amazing. And you could really bring a lot of value to my audience. They're like, where do I sign up? And so you grow your network. And so that's the other thing I always see. People are like, well, should I do a solo show or should I do an interview show? And I'm like, why, again, are you limiting yourself? Do them both. When you do a solo show and you just talk to that invisible you guys can't see it, but I have an invisible person right here. And when I do my podcast, I talk to my invisible person. I'm like, hey, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. I talk to one person, none of this, hey guys, hey, I'm so glad you're here. And I talk to my one person. And when you do that, you grow your influence because the person that's listening is like, I feel like Dave is talking to me because I am. Then when you do your interview shows, you grow your network. And both are great things to have. So you need to know your why. You need to know your who. You need to know your what. What are you going to talk about? And then how are you going to measure your success? And so when you're first starting out, it's one of those things where you're like, well, what should I focus on? Well, one of the things I always recommend, again, if you've answered those questions, you kind of have an idea. But one of the things is, have you ever noticed bands that have a great first album, and then the second one, not so much, and the third one, right? They call it the sophomore slump. Your first episode, you might go through and make all these great super sound effects and research out the, just crazy stuff, right? And it's an amazing first episode because that's what you want. But then you go to do the second episode and you're like, well, I did the first one. It took me about 4 months. And now I'm going to do a weekly show. And I got 7 days to do what I did in 4 months. So one of the things I always recommend, there's a couple different ones online that are free. I use Clockify.me and it's free. And I go in, I'm like, okay, I'm going to edit this episode and start. And then you find out later, you're like, wow, that took 45 minutes. And I always say when it comes to editing, more planning, less editing, or wait, I did that backwards. Less planning, more editing, more planning, less editing. So keep that in mind, but time everything you do. So if you do an interview, right, you probably were online for an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes because you're just yucking it up with your friend who's your first guest. All right, that's an hour and 15 minutes. Now, granted, that interview might be boiled down to 40 minutes, but you spent an hour and 15 getting it, and that counts. And then that time it takes to edit that hour and 15-minute conversation down to the actual interview. Okay, there's another hour and a half or whatever it takes. Time everything, because when you get done and you're like, wow, my first episode took 13 hours for a 20-minute podcast. Well, part of that is you're going through the learning curve. So that's always going to take longer. But at the end, you want to go, okay, this 13 hours thing, do you have 13 hours a week to do a podcast? And if the answer is no, guess what? You're not doing a weekly show. Now, you can then maybe shorten it down, maybe do a little more planning to ease on the editing. And, some of that stuff you only have to do once. But you want to know, how long is this going to take? And then do I have time in my life to fit the podcast? And what I see a lot of people do is they'll pick their schedule first. They're like, I'm doing a weekly podcast. And you're like, okay, great. And then they go out and they're like, wow, that took, 9 hours. That took 8 hours to do this 15-minute podcast. And you're like, okay, do you have 8 hours a week to do this? And they go, no. And what they do is they try to force it in. They make the podcast the priority and put their life as the second priority. And that's where you burn out. So you need to figure out, how long is this going to take to make an episode? And then ask yourself, do I have this much time to do this on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis or monthly basis? But you need to know that up front, because a lot of people do burn out. And the number one comment I get as I teach people is, wow, this takes a lot more time than I thought it was going to. Now, there's two ways to handle that. I always say pay with whatever currency you have, and those currencies are time and money. So if you got a lot of time, then do it yourself. But if you got the money, then you might want to outsource some of that stuff. It's really up to you. And also, if you are doing something that you don't like to do, definitely outsource that stuff, because that's the stuff you just end up going, oh, time to make the podcast. And you're just not that crazy about it. So some things you can do on that first episode. If you think about it, so many people are like, hey, welcome to the show. I'm a complete stranger that you don't know, and I'm now going to tell you my story. So I was born in Akron, Ohio. I had a paper route when I was 13. I was a grocery bagger. Are you asleep yet? I am, because I am a complete stranger, as are you when you first start. And what you want to do, if you think about it, Mark and I are old musicians, right? You come out and you hit them with a song that's just going to punch them in the face and go, wow, holy cow, what is this? And so when I went back to remember who your audience is, what do they want? Because your podcast is a gift, right? We just had the holidays here, and you don't want them going, oh, it's just what it's what I always wanted. Yeah, no, you want them going, holy cow, where has this been? Have you been reading my diary? This is exactly what I'm looking for. Hit them with that. And then what you want to do is use all those fun family stories as a way to make a point. So mix those in along the way, because otherwise You're just telling your story as a complete stranger to people, and they're going, I don't know who this is, and I don't really care that their dog's name was Partial. You're like, wait, what? So hit them with something they want, and then sprinkle in the information. Or if you want to, if you're going to do the whole, hey, in the future, we're going to do this. But think about this. You're starving. You're absolutely like, oh, my stomach's growling. And you look up and there's a restaurant and you're like, this is exactly what you need. And so you go into the restaurant and you sit down and they hand you a menu and you're like, great. And you're like, oh, I will take this. And the server looks at you and he goes, yeah, that's going to be next week. And you're like, wait, what? And you're like, yeah, that's next week. And you're like, oh, okay, fine. Well, I'll take this then. They're like, yeah, that's the whole menu is next week. And you're like, but I'm starving now. I got out of my car. It was raining outside. I came all the way into the restaurant. I'm hungry now. And you're like, yeah, it's all next week. So if you think about it, I've got a lot of books behind me. None of them have the table of contents highlighted. None of them, right? I highlight the good stuff, get to the good stuff. And then all that family stories and, where you grew up and when I was in college. And there are fun ways to do that because it builds your street cred. But nobody cares. I know it's a little harsh. It's a little harsh when you first start off with just, I'm going to tell you my story. Look at me. Nobody cares. Sprinkle that stuff in with the stuff that they really want. So keep that in mind. Now, I know some people say you need to niche down. Like, how niche is niche? Well, think about this. If I did a show about how to be more confident, well, who doesn't want to be more confident? Me, I'll take it. Like, okay. And that's kind of everybody, but there are some things you're probably going to talk about that might not apply to everyone. So then you say, well, what about being a more confident parent? Well, we just cut out a whole bunch of people that don't have kids, but now we can talk about parenting stuff. Oh, well, that's really hey, that's good stuff. Wait, what if I said how to be a more confident first-time parent? Ooh, wait a minute. We just cut out a whole bunch of other people, but now there are going to be these people like, what do I do with this thing? How do I get it to stop crying? What nobody told me about meconium. Oh my gosh, right? They're just freaking out on all this stuff. We've narrowed it down and these people are like, this is exactly what I need. Now, if you wanted to, again, you can niche down as little or as much as you want. What if I said how to be a more confident first-time interracial parent? Ooh, we just cut out a bunch of people and there are people left that going, yes, and there are things we need to talk about. Right? So do you have to niche down? You don't have to, but then if you think about it, there's podcasting. And then, if you turn on mainstream media, it's broadcasting. And broadcasting talks about things like money and entertainment and sports, right? Things like that. And nothing wrong with that. But it's that information that you can't get anyplace else is when people go, oh, this is my source for this information. So you end up with a smaller audience, but a more rabid audience that's like, yes, there's a show called Radio Lab, and it's done out of New York City. And if you are in a room with someone and you say the word Radio Lab, there could be a person like 10 feet away from you. And if they heard the phrase Radio Lab, they will honestly go, oh my God, I love that show. Like they have to say it. That's how rabid their fans are. So do you have to niche down? No. But does it come in handy? Yeah, you're going to end up with kind of a more smaller audience, but much more rabid. So keep that in mind. Now, the big question that everybody is probably going to ask, Dave, it's 2025. Audio or video or both? And here's my thought on this, because this makes me cry. The one tear comes out of your eye. I will have somebody come up to me and they're like, I want to do this show where I talk about, and it's super niche and nobody's talking about this. And I think I can be the person that can help people with this. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. Like, why haven't you done this? And they're like, I don't want to be on video. And I'll go, okay, don't be on video. And they'll go, what do you mean? And I'll like, don't do video, just do audio. And I'm like, wait, you can do that? And I go, yeah, I've been doing it off and on for many years. You don't have to do video. And they're like, yeah, but everybody says I have to do video. And I get that. And if you kind of dig a little deeper, you're going to find out that everybody is a company called YouTube. Okay. That's fine. But think about it. YouTube is saying you should do video. Who would benefit in that scenario? Let me think about that a second. Oh, that's right. YouTube, because they want things to put ads against. So now YouTube, I'm not knocking YouTube. It's got an algorithm. And so if you want to do video, realize you're going to learn how to make content and you're going to learn how to manipulate the algorithm. It's almost like starting a separate thing, and it can help you get found. By all means, YouTube is a great tool. I just want to make sure you're aware you don't have to, because some people are like, oh, that means I have to shave every day and I've got to brush my teeth. And you don't have to. Just realize it's more equipment. So now I've got lights stuck in my ceiling. It's a camera, which you have one already in your hands, but if you want to go buy a camera, you can. And I totally acknowledge that if you start with video, you can go anywhere you want. I can make clips of that. I can pull the audio out and put it on Captivate and syndicate it to everybody. But the other one, I've heard this stat before, that audio outperforms video 10-1. And you're like, how is that? How dare you? Well, think about it. I can't watch your video in the car because, I'm supposed to be making sure I don't hit people, but I can listen to it. And I can't really watch your YouTube while I'm washing the dishes because I'm paying attention that I don't accidentally cut myself or something, but I could listen to it. I could go on, and there are just more opportunities to listen than there are to do video. And again, if you want to do video and you have that desire, YouTube is a great tool by all means. I'm just letting you know that as much as everybody goes, everybody's doing it. Okay, but you don't have to. So some common mistakes that I see people make is, number one, the source of the information that you're going to be using. I'll give you a classic example. First of all, never start a podcast on a dare. And so it was myself and my now ex-wife, and we were trading stories about really bad dates. And her friend said, this would be a great podcast. And I was like, you know what? It could be. And so we started a show called The Dates from Hell Show. Even had spent the money for a classic 800 number. It was like 888 dates or something like that. Went the whole 9 yards. But between the both of us, we had about 5 stories. And we put this out, hey, everybody, put out your these awful stories where people were just amazingly rude to you or whatever happened. And it never really thought on us that we had about 5 stories. And what's the number one fear of most humans? Oh, that's right. Speaking in public. And number 2, I want you to throw yourself under the bus. Yeah. So to say that the stories weren't just piling in, it really didn't work. And then what was funny is at the time there were Yahoo dates and, all the different dating sites, and most of them had an affiliate program. And I was like, this will be great. Everybody will send in their stories and I'll be like, hey, this show is brought to you by eHarmony. Except we just said that these people had really horrible dates. It doesn't really make you want to get back out there. So that, again, wasn't really thought through. But to make a long story short, I know, too late, we ran out of content really, really quick. And so you might want to, I always say, do a couple episodes and just, number one, see if you like it. But also you need to know, where's this information coming from? And then before we take some questions, the last thing I beg of you to do, and I get why people don't do this, get someone not named Mom, because Mom's going to tell you it's great. She's going to be, oh, look at you. You look so professional. Oh, look at all the equipment and the lights and the microphone. Notice Mom is not talking about your content. Get somebody to listen to it, because they're going to tell you this part was really good. But there are times when there are things that could need just a little bit of polish on those. And you need somebody to tell you that, because you want to make that great first impression. So keep that in mind. And I understand why people don't, because again, that first episode takes forever. And there's just a time when you're like in The Lion King and you're like, look at what I have produced. It's an MP3 file. And you just want to send it out to the world. But I'm like, you might want to have somebody listen to that first, because authors have rough drafts, athletes have preseason, actors have dress rehearsals, and you just created the very first thing you've ever created. You might want to get some feedback on that, just a little bit before you go sending it out into the world. So let's see if we have any questions in the chat here as we start to wrap up. If Harmony, I don't know if you want to come back in and see if I missed anything while we're going along.
Yeah. Dave, man, you mentioned so many great pieces of advice. I think the niche down advice really, really resonated, and like meeting listeners where they are. That I think that was great. I saw a question that kind of hit on that. So Lead with Jim had a question. The question was, how do you determine what people really want in conjunction with your niche?
Here's a quick trick and another great use of YouTube. Go to YouTube, type in your topic, and it will show you who is the top, YouTuber in that topic. So go to their channel, go to their videos, and sort by popularity. So now you've got a list of things you could talk about, and then look at the comments. Because the one thing that's great about YouTube is people will leave a comment, especially if they're not happy with the content, and they'll say, oh, this was great. Oh, I love this, love that. You can also go to Amazon. And I remember there was a book on menopause, and it had like a 5-star, this is the best book ever. I love the fact that it went so deep into la, 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 la. And then there was somebody that gave it a 1-star review, and they're like, this is not written for real people. I don't understand anything in this book. And so you have to kind of pick, okay, who's my audience? Am I going for the person that wants a super deep dive? Or again, it just goes back to who is my audience. There are all sorts of places like that. I hang out in Facebook groups all the time. And most of the time I'm just watching and listening. Reddit, I go there frequently on a daily basis just to see what people are talking about. And so you go there not to go, hey, everybody come listen to my podcast, because that's called spam. But I can go over and see, ooh, I never thought about this. This might be a good topic for an episode. So that's a way to figure out what does your audience really want. And then the last one, and we often skip this one, ask them. In Podpage, we have an actual survey. You could use Google Forms. There's millions of ways to create a quick survey. When in doubt, just ask your audience.
Nice. Great advice there. Let's see here. I'm scrolling through the chat here. Going back up a little bit further, from Creativity Inside and Out, they asked, what's a membership site?
A membership site, in my case, because I'm a person that doesn't like to sell from the stage, but I run a website called the School of Podcasting. So a membership site is, hey, I'm going to either give you additional information that I'm not giving you for free. It could be with podcasts. Some people will do an advertising free version. And of course, you can do this in Captivate really easy. It's all right there. And, but it's usually a membership site, or in some cases, it's just a super niche people. I'm going to give you the ability to talk with other people that are in the same boat you are. So an example, and we're all going to snicker on this, but I know somebody that does a show called Living with Herpes, because you might imagine this is not something you're going to bring up at the Thanksgiving table. Hey, Uncle Carl, have you ever, okay, never mind. But they have, and they called it a super secret double probation Facebook group, because they're talking about treatments and options and all this other stuff. And so, it's something you can't get anyplace else, and it solves a problem. When you want to monetize, 9 times out of 10, you're solving a problem for somebody. I'm going, like Mark said earlier, they're either going to save you time or help you make money. So when you want to monetize, that's really what you want to look at. How am I serving my audience?
Awesome. Great. Let's see here. I see a question from Steve Campbell. Any tips around posting Facebook groups or Reddit when you have content that can help but won't be viewed as self-promotion?
I don't. The reason I've never been kicked out of a group is I don't walk the line. If you wanted to, you could go into Facebook groups and see who the admin is and say, hey, person A is asking this question. I did an episode on this. Is it okay if I post this link? That would be the way to do it. And in some cases they might. I usually just answer the question as like, if the answer needs this much, I'm going to give them this much. And I want them to go, who is this Dave Jackson guy? And when they click on my name, then they get all my information and they can see my website. But that would be the way to do it. Ask the admin, because once you get kicked out, many times they will never, ever let you back in. My very first time, this is, again, gray hair, there was a forum. So this is before Facebook. It was for ex-radio DJs. And I come to this forum, and I swear I heard like angels, like, oh, and I was like, oh, this is my target audience. And I walked in and I was like, hey guys, I'm so glad I found this. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcast. Everybody, I can get you back in front of a global audience. Everybody follow me. Let's go. And they kicked me out in 20 minutes because nobody knew who I was. and I came in and promoted a service. And the last time I checked, that's called spam, boys and girls. And they kicked me right out. So I always bring value to every conversation that I try to do, so that when you do say something, people go, I want to listen to this guy. I've seen what he said before. So always bring value.
Awesome. Sound advice there.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I see a question. Any tips to improve doing solo cast work? So they're saying I need to write everything I record. It takes forever. If I have a script or bullet points, I freeze and can't record. So what advice do you have there, Dave?
Yeah, if you haven't figured it out already, I'm a little ADHD all over the place, ricochet rabbit here. And so what I do is I know that that's a weakness of mine. I cannot stay focused. So what I do is I'm like, okay, who's my audience? What's the topic? What do I want them to walk away with? What is the takeaway for this episode? And I will write a blog post just to get Dave Jackson focused. Like, what are you trying to say here, buddy? And then this is my workflow. It may not work for everybody. And also when I write, I don't worry about grammar. I type the way I talk, because if I am going to read that, we don't write like we talk and we don't talk like we write. So I write like I talk, but I will take that and then I'll be like, okay, what are the main points here? Give me like 4 bullet points. And I write the 4 bullet points on a little yellow piece of paper here. And I'm looking at my invisible friend and I'm excited about it, because if I'm not excited about it, why are you pressing record? But I'm excited about it. And then I'm like, hey, I'm so glad you're here. Today we're going to talk about this. And let me tell you about that. And then I look at those bullet points. And I also, again, remember how I said, nobody cares about your story. This is where you put it in. So I just shared one, right, about the forum. Work those in, because that's how people get to know you. When you are, you picked your schedule because you timed yourself. So now you have a schedule that you can hit. You are seen as reliable. When you give them great content, they're like, oh my gosh, look at this. This is amazing. They like you. When you sprinkle in stories about yourself, they get to know you. And there you go. The trifecta. They know you, they like you, they trust you. So when you say, hey, I've got this new book. Hey, I've got a membership site. Hey, join my, premium content, whatever it is, that's how it works.
Awesome. Okay. Dave, are you up for 2 minutes of rapid fire?
Oh, rapid fire is not my strong suit, but I will do my best.
Okay. I see a question from Mike McAllen. Should your podcast have a newsletter?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Question from Frank. Dave, what are your thoughts on the increasing average run times of many podcasts?
There is no such thing as too long, only too boring. That is from Valerie Geller from the book Beyond Powerful Radio. So I've listened to 5-minute podcasts that felt like an hour. I've listened to an hour-long podcast that felt like 5 minutes. Don't be boring.
Excellent. Let's see here. One more from Sadaf. What are some effective podcast formats? Solo, interview, panel? What do you think there?
Yes. Whichever one you want to do. That's the beautiful thing of podcasting. There's nobody outside my door going, Dave, hey, you did a solo show last week, and the week before you did an interview show. So we need to, no, it's my show. I can do whatever I want. Aisha Tyler, she's an actress. She's a director. She was on Friends many moons ago. And the thing she loves about her podcast, she's like, it's mine. She goes, even your house is still owned by the bank unless you paid it out. She goes, it's mine. She goes, and she edited it. She could have had an assistant do it. It's mine. And you can do whatever you want. So whatever works for your again, who's my audience? What do they want? And then go from there.
Outstanding. All right. I think we're good here. Are we ready to talk about remote recording with Hari?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm ready.
Dave, thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge and all of this advice for folks that are getting started with creating a podcast. And I think Gary is going to join me and help me welcome Hari from Boomcaster.
Yes. Hello, everyone. It's a bit of a team effort this evening with Captivate and Adobe. We're going to keep the sessions rolling between Harmony and myself. So thank you very much, everyone, so far for all of your comments and questions. They've been very, very cool. And thank you to Danny, who's part of our experienced team. He's got some bants going on as well in the comments and stuff. So yeah, it's all very good. And thank you for the questions as well. And Dave is such a cool guy. I mean, he probably won't remember the chat that I had with him at Podcast Movement a couple of years ago, but he was one of the coolest people. and that I met at that conference. And he's such a cool guy. So great talk there, Dave. Some great advice. I think everyone in the chat has got a big thumbs up for all of the tips and help, especially for new podcasters. So that was very cool. So Harmony, we've now got our next speaker.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we'd love to welcome on Hari from Boomcaster. Welcome, Hari.
Thank you. Thank you, Harmony. Thank you, Gary. It's
Such
really
a-
hard act to follow, Dave.
I'm sure you'll be fine, Ari. Yeah. Looking forward to your talk.
Yeah, super excited for your expertise. So we're going to head off screen and kick it over to you.
Thank you. So a quick note, 5 years ago when I started in podcasting, Dave is the one that I listened to. He's the one kind of helped me kind of the first steps in podcasting. Since then, about a year passed, I starting the podcasting. I actually started the software company. But Dave, you kind of go back to my initial podcast first step. So, great advice as always. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, if you don't mind. All right, if you could, Gary, put this up on the screen for us. Let me see. There we go. Fantastic. So quickly, again, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Hari Gopalakrishna, and I'm the founder and CEO of Boomcaster. And quickly, an intro to Boomcaster. It's a recording and streaming platform, purpose-built for podcasting. And we're self-funded, independent software company based out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, United States. So I want to start with this because storytelling is central to building human connections. And in today's digital age, as we all know, podcasts have become one of the most powerful ways to share ideas, inspire change, and build communities. But as podcasters, we face some unique challenges, and some of which Dave has really captured. There's geographical limitations. There's always this targeting higher production quality. And there's also production complexity, and one of the reasons why people don't continue podcasting. Now, remote podcasting platforms or recording platforms have revolutionized this process, and there are many platforms out there today, and they make it possible to tell stories at a global scale. So today, what we're going to do is we'll explore some of the details around remote recording, how it simplifies production, how it can help drive growth, also how it helps podcasters connect with audiences worldwide. And as part of this, I kind of broke this down to kind of 4 sections. We'll jump into what remote recording is, and again, some of the platforms that you might already be currently using. And then we'll go into what the technology behind that is. And then based on all of the sessions and recordings that I've seen online, I have 5 top tips for success. And that applies even if you're using something like a conference recording platform like Zoom. And then last, I'm going to wrap it up by how some of the podcasters are kind of taking advantage of some of these newer functionality capabilities within remote recording platforms to really help grow. So first off, let me start with what's different about remote recording platforms. First of all, it allows you to interview just about anybody from around the globe, just as if they were sitting right next to you. Now, these platforms can record in uncompressed audio formats, and that format is WAV. So if you're familiar with MP3, it's a compressed format. So when you record directly off the mic in a PCM or a WAV format, it is the highest quality that you can get from a mic on a computer. Now, the second part about, again, video, if you're using video, you can get high resolution up to 4K for a single participant that's in the session. Most of these recording platforms are double enders, which means that each of the party in the session is recorded independently at their computer or desktop or your mobile device. And the other element of that is that it's all separate recording tracks. So if there are 3 people on the podcast, all 3 have separate tracks that's audio and video, and you can combine them, and you have a lot of flexibility in terms of editing, removing background noise, dogs barking, etc., etc. And many of these platforms also offer built-in editors. Now, they're not going to be your high-end editing, digital audio workstation, or even, Adobe Premiere type applications, but they will give you some quick editing capability, and it also allows you to combine these high quality files, audio and video, put them together and give you a finished product, which you can then, either have some finishing touches elsewhere, or use it just as is if, you're short on time, short on budget. And then last but not least, most of these platforms also offer live streaming capabilities with just one click. And that's, again, if you're using live streaming as one of the means to get out to your community, again, you don't have to do it as a podcaster, but if you do it, that's an opportunity for you to do so. So what is the technology and how does it work? Almost all of the platforms today offer this via the browser, which means you don't have anything to install and nothing to download. And almost all of them generally prefer Chromium-based browsers, which is Chrome and Edge. And these are modern browsers that support, latest and greatest open source technologies. And then they are recorded locally, as I mentioned, which means you're recorded at your computer, on your browser, saved locally, and then uploaded to the cloud. So the platform itself is going to collect that file from the participant, so you don't have to actually ask them to send you anything. Everything happens in the background, and it is just sent to your dashboard automatically. And then, like I said, on-demand live streaming, if that's of interest to you, I know Danny has done some Ask Me Anything sessions, so if that's of interest to you, maybe once in a while or once in a month, once in a few months, if that's something that you want to do to connect with your community, that's an option. And there are several podcasts that do live today, just as a standard methodology. And then this is the 5 top things that I believe, from what I've seen, are the things that you need to keep in mind. And again, if you're not using a platform like, let's say, Boomcaster or Riverside as an example, you can still use these tips. Right. Number 1, the mic selection. Right. Generally, what we see is everybody is busy. We're all we have too many things drawing us in terms of attention. We come in, we pick some mic, and it's just not the right mic. Now, if you're using a remote recording platform, you can easily look at every single one of the guests or participant and check to see which devices, equipment they're using, and guide them through the right selection. And I've seen even when you do that, sometimes guests are confused, they're not really sure which mic they're really using, and just use a gentle tap test on the mic just to make sure that it is the right mic they want to use. Yeah. Second one is echo cancellation and noise cancellation. Now, when you come into these platforms, they generally look like a great feature to have, which is fantastic. Echo cancellation really allows you to prevent any sound from leaking from your speaker back to the mic. Noise cancellation just prevents noise cancellation real time. If there's some sort of a air conditioner, a buzzing noise, that sort of thing could be lowered. But the challenge with this is that it does process the audio, and as a result, the final audio that you get would be impacted. So ideally, you would want to have some sort of a headphone, and even if it's a Bluetooth headphone, that should be good enough. But I would recommend against using a Bluetooth mic for any sort of recording. They typically come out with really poor outputs. The other challenge that we see with Bluetooth is that a lot of times you're not really sure if that Bluetooth device is fully charged, and 30 minutes into the session, you could potentially have a low battery, or even before it runs out of battery, the sound's going to really fail. And then the third one is around camera and the CPU. So if you're using a camera, please make sure there's good lighting in the room. Most often what happens is, you have a camera just because there's a camera, and just simply, you don't have the proper lighting, and that's also fine. But in those cases, just know that the CPU is going to work over time to compensate for the light. and and any sort of noise that the video produces, CPU is working over time, and that kind of affects the overall experience of the recording session. And then the last two, 4 and 5, might sound really very simple and straightforward, but restarting is simple, very simple, right? You should recommend that your guest should reboot. Again, you should reboot it yourself. Actually, I did the reboot before I joined this session. The reason is that over time the resources could get locked up. Sometimes you could have memory leaks, and if you don't reboot for a very long period of time, it's very possible that some of the resources, including like the devices that you're trying to use, is locked up. Yeah, and that's something that would completely go away if you just simply reboot it. You get a fresh restart. The resources are unlocked, and it's it's good to go. Go wired, and now go wired in the sense that you can go wired, and you should go wired both on the power side of things and the Ethernet side of things. Again, it's something that you probably don't pay attention to when you're joining a session. If you're on laptop battery, typically what happens is, again, CPU is ramped down in order to preserve the battery power, and as a result, the overall experience can suffer. And same is true for Ethernet. Now, all of us pay attention to upload and download, right? And those are two numbers that we always know. But there are other factors like latency and jitter, for example. And latency is the amount of time it takes for a packet to go somewhere and come back to you. And the jitter is how consistent that delay is. So when these two, what I call dance partners, don't really dance well, you're going to have challenges no matter what type of recording session you're in. And again, with a direct connection, a direct wired connection to your router, you can really eliminate a lot of these issues. And really, like for $10, $15, you can probably get a really long a Cat5 cable that you can run. I think I skipped one over here, and this really is important because a lot of folks use applications like Teams and Zoom that are conference recording solutions, right, to really record the podcast. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just want you to know the differences between those types of applications and a dedicated or a purpose-built remote recording platform. Zoom, as an example, will have compressed lower fidelity audio, and it's designed that way because they're expected to have a large number of participants on the call at one time, and so they're optimized for having many people but not necessarily higher quality audio. And same is true for video. And generally it's 720 or lower. It drops lower than 720 when there's more people on. And generally Zoom is susceptible to glitches, or Zoom recording is, right? Because it's recorded in the cloud. Remote recording platforms, on the other end, because they're recorded at each of the participants' computer, it's directly coming right off the mic, right off the camera into the device. It is not impacted by glitches, any sort of issues that you would see in a typical video conference. And then customization, these applications, the conferencing applications, don't really provide any ability for you to really have branding options. Like you want to be able to present your brand. You're going to be talking to somebody for an hour, 2 hours, or you're streaming for an hour. You want to showcase your brand colors, and that opportunity exists with remote recording platforms. And last but not least, if you do want to stream, conference recording platforms really are not, typically set up for it. And again, you can do it. It does require some additional setup. Now I'm going to switch to the last couple of slides here. So in the last two slides, I want to focus on the growth side of it. And coming back to what Dave had mentioned earlier, it is true. Like podcasting is what you define it to be, right? If you want it to be audio only, and it should be audio only. But the reason why we're seeing some sort of activity more on the YouTube end of it is because YouTube is still one of the largest platforms in terms of user engagement, and having an additional channel, if you have the resources and the time to do it, allows you to really expand that opportunity. And these are platforms that have active engagement. Even if it's not live streaming, you still have active engagement on YouTube. And then it simply increases discoverability. Like if you want to find something on YouTube, it's fast to find something, right? And so again, your listeners may not be watching on YouTube, but they might find you on YouTube. Again, you may not have to, record every session on YouTube. You may not have to stream every session on YouTube. It just presents you another opportunity, right? And lastly, like if, in terms of your specific niche, if there aren't many people on YouTube, it's an opportunity for you to really present yourself in that channel and build a competitive advantage. Now, last but not least, most of these platforms, including Boomcaster, would allow you to record, edit, stream, all of those, right? So one of the ways you could speed up content creation is be able to take all of these high quality files that you record, combine them on the platform itself and produce it, right? And of course, you can, you want to be able to use other tools, and you can use other tools to be able to really improve that production quality. But it does give you some baseline in terms of getting you to a point where you can take that content and do something with it. So again, these are a couple of tips. These are, again, to Dave's point, nobody's forcing you to do video, and you shouldn't do video if you're not comfortable doing video. Honestly, I'm not personally very comfortable doing video, but it's one of those things. It's an opportunity for all of us to really kind of experiment with. And remote podcasting platforms allow you to do that. And that's, really it. I just want to do a quick run through and open up to any questions you guys have.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Hari. It sounds like a lot of what you're saying is resonating with the crowd in the chat. A lot of great advice, and it's so nice to have those tips of success, like thinking about microphone placement and a microphone selection, thinking about echo cancellation. I remember when I first got into the field, it was something I never even thought of, and going wired was huge too. So yeah, it's great advice. Gary, what are we seeing in the chat?
Yeah, so that was a great talk, Hari. Thank you very much. And just very quickly, a point that I think is really important to understand for a lot of, especially new podcasters who want to get into video, is that difference in compression between standard call-based services like Zoom and Teams and stuff versus a dedicated service like Boomcaster. It makes a huge difference, that sort of compressed down digital type of sound that you get to the voice when you just use something like Zoom. So that was really cool. Thank you very much. We did have some questions in, so I'll fire these over to you. The first one comes from Misfit Preachers, a great name. It says, what's the difference between double ender versus multi-track? Is it just moving from 2 to 2+?
No, so double ender simply means that you're recording at each end of the session. So if you and I are in two sides of the session, you're simply recording at both ends. And so that allows you to get the 2 tracks. Now, in Zoom, you can get multi-track, but by default, it produces a single track. But when you produce a single track, it's very difficult to edit in a audio workstation or even in a video tool. Right? If you have a multi-track video file, let's say 2 files or 3 files, like we're all 3 of us in this session, you can really decide who you want to put up full screen, minimize where you want to place something in the middle, remove somebody. Let's say earlier we had some issues when Mark joined, his video didn't work, so you can just remove him for a few seconds if you want to. So the flexibility post-production is really high when you have multi-track files.
Gotcha. Okay, next question is from Ryan. I think I'm saying this right. Ryan Lahoulier. It says, does the platform check the resources of a computer before recording, and what happens if the guest system runs out of local memory during recording?
Great question. This is challenging in general because what we've seen, for example, like we've seen folks join with, let's say, a Chromebook, and Chromebooks notoriously have kind of lower local storage. And generally, it is not an issue, because what happens with all of these podcasting platforms is that they simultaneously record, download, and upload all at the same time, right? So generally, you don't need as much storage. But when this comes into play is when your network isn't that great. So let's say the guest has a poor network and a poor storage configuration. So like unlikely, but it's possible. But if both happen at the same time, then what happens is most of these platforms would pause upload, and the recording file size is going to start getting bigger and bigger. And then when at least in Boomcaster, how we handle it is when it becomes a certain, let's say 5 or 10% remaining, we immediately warn all the hosts that, hey, there's no more space to record. You can stop the recording, let the upload finish, and then you can start again.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. Okie dokie. Moving on. This is another one from Misfit Preachers. Says, what size file should I expect of an episode of 3 speakers, audio and video, through Boomcaster?
So it depends on whether you're recording audio or video. Generally, if you're just recording audio, for an hour, each person could have up to 800 MB. It does depend, but 600 to 800 MB per person per track, and that's times 3 tracks. Now, in comparison, a fully finished file from Zoom might be less than 100 MB, sometimes 200, right? So significant difference in compression.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it goes back to what you were saying about that compression stuff. Gotcha. Okay, and then the last question we had through was from Sadaf Bainan. Says, about echo cancellation. Do you say to either use headphones or turn off echo cancellation? Thank you, Hari.
Yeah, so what's recommended is that you put on a headphone and turn off echo cancellation. Especially when echo cancellation is on and you talk over each other, there would be some clear issues introduced in the audio file, and it would be very, very visible. Now, if you are using echo cancellation, what I would recommend is really leave just enough gap in these conversations. Try not to talk over each other, and that would help at least eliminate some of the issues that might be introduced. Right,
I see. Okay, unless we have any more questions in the chat, I think that's going to be it from Hari. That's a great talk, and some in terms of getting all the technical stuff nailed and some recommendations for that stuff, because that is a bit of a minefield, outside of somebody just grabbing their phone or a microphone and wanting to start something. When you do want to delve into the realm of having guests on your show, doing a bit of live streaming and all that stuff, it can be a real thing for people. So that's great advice. Thank you very much. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. And one last thing I would say is that, in general, this is one of the variables in podcasting, is especially when you're doing it remote, is you don't know what the other person is going to be coming up with on the other end, what computer, what laptop, what mic. But, one advice that I would have is, if possible, try to have a pre-call, do an equipment check early, and even to do a test recording that eliminates as many problems as you can possibly have. Again, I just wanted to make sure that this session was really kind of compact. I didn't want to go into too much technology. And there's plenty of opportunities if you want to have that conversation from a tech side. But really, I want to leave enough time for, marketing, growth, that type of conversation on this Growth Summit. But thank you for having me. Really enjoyed this conversation. Let me know if offline if you have any questions.
Thanks so much. That sound advice, doing that test call, that's key. That has saved me so many times.
Yeah, same. Yeah. So Harmony, we are getting through our amazing speakers. It's been I've learned so much in the last 45 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's such great, even if you've been in podcasting for years, there's so many good bits of information, reminders of oh yeah, I should be doing this, or reminders of tips for success. So yeah, we're about halfway through, and we're about to bring on Lauren from Tink Media.
Indeedy, yes. So, hey, Lauren.
Hi, how are you guys? I've already learned so much. I wasn't even here the whole time, and I've already learned so much.
Yeah, we're good, thank you. So you're here to give us a talk on everything podcast marketing.
Everyone's favorite topic, right? Everyone loves
Indeed.
to talk about marketing.
Excellent. So,
room. I like marketing. I'm going to make it fun. I promise.
oh, cool. So we will hand the screen over to you, and away you go. Enjoy.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I'm really excited to talk about marketing. My goal when I talk to people about marketing, because often it's not what people want to think about. They don't want to spend their time doing it. And often it's like not the right part of people's brains when they're making audio. You know, they want to be able to create something, but it's really, really, really important. So what I'm hoping that happens is when I'm done talking, you leave and you feel excited and that it's doable. And there's like 3 things that you want to run away with to try on your own. I'm going to share my screen. Hang on a second. Oh. Percent, sorry. Okay. Can you all see? Yes. Great. Okay. So podcast marketing 101. If a perfect podcast drops without a marketing plan, doesn't make a sound. You and your team could spend untold hours producing a great podcast, but if you're not smart about your marketing, odds are no one will hear it. It really could happen that no one will hear it. I think people are getting better about this, but not that long ago, I think people thought that it just got distributed somewhere. And maybe if you were lucky, it got picked up by Apple Podcasts or something. But really, I'm always trying to get people to spend 50% of their time on the marketing, and no one wants to do that. But I realize it's probably not possible for most teams. But really, if you're spending all this time on the show and on this beautiful thing you're making, it really is worth it to spend time on marketing. And the other thing I'm going to hopefully help you with is figuring out what's worth your time and what's not worth your time, so that all becomes a little bit easier. Okay, really quick about me. I founded a podcast marketing PR company. We do a lot of other things too. It's called Tink. I named it after Tinkerbell. And then I write 2 newsletters. I think you actually might want to know about. Podcast, the newsletter, is just, I started it before I was even in the industry as a fan of audio. I write about podcasts that I love. And I'm telling you this because I take pitches. So you should email me. And then Podcast Marketing Magic is the newsletter that my company writes. My whole team writes it. It comes out every Friday. And honestly, it's so good that, because I don't write it every time. And so sometimes I get an issue of Podcast Marketing Magic. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is good stuff. We tell all of our secrets. So I would definitely subscribe to Podcast Marketing Magic. And also there's just backlogs of everything that I'm going to be talking about today in great detail. The one thing that I would say is not true anymore is I'm not really on Twitter anymore. Is any surprises there? I haven't found a new home for my social media addiction. I'm basically lurking in Reddit. So just email me or follow my newsletter if you have a question. Always happy to talk to everyone if you have a question afterwards. I could talk about this for 10 hours today, and I won't. So we're going to go straight to your toolbox, your marketing growth toolbox. I would like to split it up into 2 different things. There's the stuff on the left, which I'm going to go through first, partially because I don't love it, but it's not my absolutely favorite stuff to talk about. My favorite stuff to talk about is on the right side. That's the stuff that gives you slow, constant growth. That's the stuff on the right side. So let's talk about the stuff on the left side first. And I will also say, when you're marketing and you're doing PR, there's a difference. There's 2 different approaches. There's the PR approach, the PR heavy approach, because you can usually do a mixture of both. The PR heavy approach is very pitching heavy, and I'm going to talk about that a lot. That's if you have something new, a new show, a new season, a special episode. You can do a campaign around an episode, anything that's buzzworthy, that needs to be written about, that needs a special attention, that people will get really, really excited about. And as a PR person, when you have your PR hat on, sometimes you have to kind of create the excitement. You might even want to make a special episode about something happening. You don't have to wait for the exciting things to happen in your podcast. You can create them. And what I mean by that is you could create a mini series that could sound overwhelming. It doesn't have to be a big deal. What if in Women's History Month you had 3 episodes about women of history in the genre of your topic? That's a series. That's a mini series. That's newsworthy. That's something to pitch. That's something to pitch to everyone. So that's the PR side. We're going to talk about that. It's pitching to the podcast listening apps. It's pitching to podcast newsletters. It's, regular kinds of media. It's, going heavy on your social media if that's something you want to spend your time doing. That's if you have something new. Especially new shows, you have to take advantage of the buzziness of it being new. People are really, really going to know about new things. The other approach that I take with a lot of my clients is the more marketing heavy approach. That's maybe if they've been going for a long time and they have a lot of inventory. They already have episodes. They have already had a lot of downloads, because once you get downloads, that's when you can really start doing partnerships with other shows. And if you were to take away one thing from what I talk about today, it is that partnerships and borrowing audiences is how to grow a show. The stuff on the left is on the left, and I say it might give you a spike. It's really important. It's great. Take advantage of that newness, but it's not going to get you the slow, constant growth that organic stuff gets when you partner with other people. It's all about identifying shows that are like yours and figuring out how to get in front of those listeners. We're going to get to that second, because I want to talk about the stuff on the left first. First of all, I really want to speak quickly about paid advertising. I mean, I always say if someone has money to spend, I will help them spend it. I have very strong beliefs about where to spend money and not spend money, but I don't think you need to spend money. However, if I had money, just observations of I've spent very big budgets and very small budgets for people. People tend to like Overcast. The reason I would check it out is because they have a lot of options in different kind of categories you can pay for, and the prices change all the time. So just keep on checking. Castbox, people like it, gives you a guarantee. So you're not gonna, you pay for the lift that you get. They don't take your ad down until you get the lift you're paying for. People really like that. It gets that lift. However, a lot of the things I must admit that I see come across my inbox about this new way to market a podcast, a lot of it, I think of it as almost like Ozempic. It's like you kind of would have to keep on pouring money into a lot of the ways to spend money. And it might be good at a launch of something, but I think if I had money to spend, love Overcast, Castbox, that's fine. I would invest in paid feed drops and paid promos on shows that align. That is the only way I would spend money. I would either have one big show that maybe is a little bit more expensive, or a couple, if I had more money to play with, maybe mix it up a little bit. I would go to those shows, ask for their rate cards, see how much it would cost for me to drop an entire episode of my show onto theirs, the trailer, or ask them to read a promo, something like that. That is how I would spend my money right now. I mean, it's hard to say anything with absolutes in podcasting. Every single show is different, but I really would probably not spend money on social media almost ever. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes, and we can talk about social media a little bit. I don't spend too much time thinking about social media. It generally doesn't drive downloads, and I say generally, and I can talk about that soon. Okay, so getting featured. This is when I say getting featured, I mean by the podcast apps, the listening apps, Apple Podcasts. There's a ton of them. The reason this is so good is because, well, I'll step back a second. There's something else I want you to remember. It's very hard to convert a non-listener to a listener. I don't know if you've ever tried to do this. Have you ever tried to get your mother or a friend from high school to listen to your podcast? If podcasting isn't part of their daily habit, it's going to be really hard to get them to listen to yours. It's much easier to convert people that are already listeners. So the heart of everything I do is going after where the listeners are. it would be great if I could start getting more people listening to podcasts. But if I'm just worried about my own podcast or my own client's podcast, I'm just trying to get people there, low hanging fruit, people already listening to podcasts. That's why pitching yourself to Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, all those. It's great because those people that are going to see it are already podcast listeners and they're in search mode. They're browsing for something new when they see it. So, you can, there's a bunch of places you can submit. It's funny because Apple Podcasts, it kind of used to be, there's no silver bullets, but it was a big deal to get featured by Apple Podcasts. It could really make a big difference a couple of years ago. It still is very good, but there's more apps. Apple Podcast features more apps, which is great, but it might not cause as big of a difference as it used to. But there's tons of other opportunities. I would just, I'm going to focus on, Apple Podcasts and Spotify have forms that you can fill out, and I can share those links afterwards. There's actually forms that you fill out to be submitted onto those apps. And then I will also say, I'll talk about those forms in a second. I'm going to use Apple Podcasts as an example, but they're all kind of the same, but we'll just go there for an example. But before I forget, I would subscribe to the Pocket Cast newsletter. They have a newsletter for creators, and every single month they send out an email that says, we're featuring this next month. Reply to this email if your show fits in one of these categories and we'll feature it. And, Pocket Casts, it's the app that I use. It is smaller. It's small enough that there's a person named M, a wonderful person behind that email making those decisions. It's a real human. It's a smaller app, but it still can make a really big difference for your show to get featured. So I'm subscribed to that newsletter. Apple Podcasts, let's go think about this form. So you're filling out this form. It's a pitch letter, basically, in form field. Imagine there is a back end. Someone's checking it on the back end. So you want to make your copy pop. It has to stand out from the sea of rows of copy that this person is reading, because it is a real person reading this stuff. You click on the link, start filling out the form. Most of it is pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to point out a few things. First of all, don't submit every episode. I would submit every 3 or 4 months. They ask that you submit 2 weeks in advance from when you'd like it to be featured. So keep that in mind. And so if your show is coming out with a new season or you're launching, you want to keep that in mind. The apps, what they're kind of looking for most of the time is like the head of the front page of a newspaper. What's timely? What's newsworthy? Why you, why now? I think why you, why now is the question you have to answer when you're filling out this form and when you're doing pitching in general. That's why sometimes I said, create an exciting event. The why you, why now is I'm doing a mini series, or it's Halloween and I made a Halloween episode. That counts as why you, why now. One of the fields says, which region are you interested in being featured in? And most people pick Canada, UK, the US, wherever they're podcasting from usually. I like to play around with that because those are very, very crowded territories. It's much more likely that you'll get chosen if you pick a country, another country. So I would look at your analytics and see what other countries where are my listeners other than the US, Canada, and the UK. So like one time I had a client, it was an American road trip show. And I'm talking to him, he casually mentions that he had a lot of listeners in Italy. We were like, really? I submitted to Italy, got featured in Italy. And, that's a moment to celebrate for you. You can tell people that it was trending on Apple Podcasts, or it was featured on Apple Podcasts. And there's a much greater chance that someone on Apple Podcasts will see it and it could get featured in another country. Also, you don't need to include art or audio, but I think it helps. And there's special dimensions on there for a special banner. I would include everything that they ask for. It can't hurt. Don't submit the same request every time. And the most important field is actually one that says something like, how will you promote, or tell us about your marketing plan, or something like that. I wish I had the right wording, but you'll know it. They don't really care about the marketing plan for your podcast. What they're asking is, what they're kind of saying is like, we're Apple Podcasts. We're doing you a favor. What are you going to do for us? They want to know you're a good partner. They want to know that you are going to say, I'm going to tell my audience to listen on Apple Podcasts. I'm going to use the Apple Podcast link on my social. And by the way, I have this many followers, and in my newsletter, and I have this many readers. And on my show, I'm going to say, listen on Apple Podcasts. And on my website, I have an Apple Podcast button. It's just proving that you are going to you make the most of it if they select you, and that you'll be a good partner. Once again, could cause a spike. When you get shot up in front of everyone, there's going to be people that go, that wasn't for me. So this kind of thing will get you a spike, but you probably will see things come down. Social media, I just want to not spend very much time on this. It's good for the audience that you already have, but it can be an echo chamber, not necessarily the audience that you want. There's a lot of reasons for this. First of all, if I'm on TikTok, I don't want to get off TikTok. You know this. Wild horses could not drag me away, most people away. So people aren't going to go onto another platform. And also, it's often just the wrong audience. Like I said before, there are a lot of not podcast listeners on social media. So you might think that you're marketing when you're tweeting and stuff. It's good. Pick a few places that you like or that you don't mind. It's good to have the handles. It's good to be there. Remind people that an episode is out maybe, but I would not spend too much time worrying about it, honestly. I think if you gave yourself a challenge to like post less, if this is hard for you to do, go on a little cleanse and see what happens. I think you'll find it won't change your downloads if you're willing to take that experiment. One thing, I would use episodes.fm or pod.link. Go there. You can put in your show. It'll populate this thing that looks like a web page. I would use that on social media and in newsletters whenever you're sending your episode to a lot of people and you don't know what they listen on. Like I listen on Pocket Casts, some people listen on Apple Podcasts, because if you're sending an Apple Podcast link to a lot of people, what if they don't have an iPhone? They're going to get a bad experience and they might not listen. So pod.link and episodes.fm will give a nice page that you can use that has all of the buttons at the top so that people can listen on whichever platform they prefer. Okay, now I want to talk about the right side of the toolbox, which is my favorite. It is stuff like what I said before. When I have a client, this is going to sound a little cheesy, and you can rephrase it however you'd like. But I sit down and I think, who are their podcast friends? And what I mean by that is, where is the overlap in listeners? And it's funny because, pretend I have a food show. Of course, I'm going to go to other food shows, but it's even more important than a genre match, a vibe match. You listen to more than one genre of show, but I'm sure the vibe is kind of the same, So that's equally important, to find a podcast where maybe it's a completely different topic, but that it feels the same. Maybe they're both like the same kind of comedy or the same kind of politics or something like that. Make a list of the shows. That's the first thing I do with my client. Then I put that in a document. And then next to that, I say, what's the play date I'm putting these two friends on? What is the partnership? How am I going to get my audience in front of that audience where I know my listeners are? There's many, I love this because there's so many creative ways to do it. Promo swaps, which if you listen to podcasts, you'll know that's when you hear a podcaster say, hey, if you like this show, you'll like this other show. I set those up all the time for my clients, and you can set them up too. A feed swap is when I would put an entire episode of my show onto the feed of another show. Just send them the file. They upload the file. They would say, hey, this week we have a special episode. It's something from Lauren Passell's podcast. Those, if those are well done, they can really, really make a big difference. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit later. They're one of my favorite tools to use, but you have to use them sparingly. Guest swaps, that could either be reaching out to a podcast and saying, can I be a guest on your show? And just hoping that they'll say yes. Maybe they just have an interview show and they're looking for guests. Even if they don't, what if you said, hey, like, you could be on my show, I can be on your show, or, there's other creative ways to do this. But it's a huge driver. I'm going to talk about a couple more options later on. I kind of consider apps a partnership too, because, you're saying I'm going to be a good partner and mention Apple Podcasts. But and then the other thing, I probably don't have much time to talk about it today, but starting a podcast newsletter is a very good idea. Sometimes people freak out. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to put so much stuff in it. They worry about the content. I would start it yesterday if I didn't have one already, because, you don't own your Apple Podcasts listeners. They could subscribe and go away. Never know they were there. You own your newsletter subscribers. It's okay if you don't have content yet. Just start the newsletter. Eventually it could just be, we have an episode here, bonus content, transcripts. There's all this stuff, getting to know you as the podcaster more. There's a lot of things, recommending other podcasts. Oh my gosh. Then guess what? When you're doing these partnerships, you could say, hey, will you do a 30-second promo for me? I can do that and put you in my newsletter. So now you have something else to work with when you're building these partnerships. Start a newsletter. Why I love them, slow but constant growth, and they're free. The thing is, they take time and you have to experiment. People say, yeah, I did a promo swap and it didn't work. You have to do them like all the time. I mean, I shouldn't say that. No absolutes, Lauren, but I find that you just have to build it into your marketing. And maybe that's something that you want to build into your schedule, where it's like, take away some of the time you're spending on social media and reach out to 3 people a week, 3 podcast friends a week, and see if they want to have a partnership. And you can suggest a promo swap or say, do you want to read a 30-second ad for me? In return, I'll do this. You can do that. Or you can just say like a really heartfelt letter that's like, no, it can be very short. I'd say 100 to 300 words. I would say, hey, I really like your show. It has similar vibes to me. We talk about the same things. I think we can both grow if we work together. What do you think? Maybe you even get on a call. I feel like the times that the people get on a call to think of something creative, that really works. Because really, you don't need to explain your whole life story. This is the show. Here's 10 pages. Here's my bio. You just need to get them to open the door. That's why the first note can be so short and just heartfelt, and say, I want to work with you. I think there's some ideas. If they do not respond, then you can follow up with some more information. I tend to get a lot of responses from the follow-up because our inboxes are all nightmares. And also, well, we'll talk about that in a second. I also just think it's great, promo swaps, recommending other shows to other people. I was once doing a speech at Podcast Movement and someone stood up and said, why would I send someone to another show? And I was like, I think you're in the wrong business, because that's what works. That's what it's all about. Find that a lot of those shows that I work with are really open to that kind of thing, and they work. Also, I just think it's great. Like, as a listener, I like to hear promo swaps because I'm looking for new stuff. So I think it's just, you're doing good for the entire audio community by doing promo swaps. Here's a few ways to find your friends, your podcast friends. I guess I need to take Chartable off of this, RIP. But Raphonic is one of my favorite places. I should get raphonic.com/graph tattooed on my arm. If you go to raphonic.com/graph, type in your show, this huge bursts will happen on screen. It's beautiful. Sometimes when I'm showing this to my clients and they don't act excited, I get upset because it hurts my feelings when people don't get excited about it. It will show you your podcast neighborhood or galaxy, and you can swivel around. You can, the shows that have your audience overlap. Raphonic.com/graph. Raphonic is not free. Raphonic.com/graph is free. So that is usually the first thing I do when I'm looking. And plus, it's just really fun. I use Listen Notes. It's like the Wikipedia of podcasts, Player FM. This is like kind of weird that I do this. Player FM is an app. If I'm looking for pretend I have a gardening show and I want podcast friends, I'll literally type into Google. This is so weird. I'm so old. I type in Player FM, best gardening podcasts. That's it. And I guarantee you there's a weird list called Best Gardening Podcasts on Player FM. It's an app, but their website has these weird lists. That's what you're looking for. Someone who has already used data or curated lists for you. That's a great way to find your podcast friends. Also, I don't think enough people survey. And if you've been going for a year, I would absolutely survey your audience. There's a very good article by Tom Webster. I think it's called What We Talk About When We Talk About Podcasting. And he has in that article some really good questions you can put in your survey. a couple of them are just like, do you think the show should be longer or shorter? You know, there's good content questions you can ask, but also I would ask, what other podcasts are you listening to? And what other newsletters are you reading? That's what I would want to know. And then the apps, look up your show or a comp show. If your show is small, look up a show similar and scroll down to the bottom. Like if you open up your show on Apple Podcasts and scroll to the bottom, it'll say listeners also like, or you might also like. That's another way to find your friends. Okay. Also, so tinkmedia.co, it's my business. I literally love people swapping so much that I built a database. And listen, I don't know if this will resonate with anyone. It's a little like shopping at TJ Maxx, this thing. It's not beautiful. You have to go through all the hangers a million times. It's kind of a messy, but it works. I just put it on my website because I so badly wanted it. You know, it's free. I just wanted people to be able to swap. You enter your show and a few details about it, and you can browse. And the good thing about this is, I mean, I use it all the time for my own clients. I hear stories, success stories. I'm thinking of calling it the friendship database, because a lot of times people will come up to me and say, hey, I found my new podcast co-host in your database. Like, it's all sorts of things can happen when you search. And the good thing is, you know, if you're emailing cold a podcast, they might have no idea what a promo swap is. And then you have to explain it and blah, blah, blah. If you're emailing someone in this database, you just say, I found you the Tink database. Do you want to partner with me? They're going to know what you're talking about. Okay, like I said before, there's the promo swap, the feed swap, crossover episodes. What if you found a podcast friend and you said, let's have one conversation together, split it in half goes on your feed, half goes on my feed. Then everyone has to listen to both sides in both audiences. You also can do this kind of swap in social media or newsletters. You know, I also think there's like panels, events, all sorts of things. The more creative, the better. Also, pitching to newsletters, please do this. You know, once again, your target audience, anyone dorky enough to subscribe to a podcast newsletter, and I can say this because I probably subscribe to more than anyone, and I have several newsletters. They're looking for new podcasts to listen to. Find both podcast newsletters and newsletters that are niche to whatever your podcast is about. My biggest tip is, subscribe to them first, read them first. We can see if you subscribe. It's weird to get a pitch from someone that doesn't subscribe, to be quite honest. Also, I get a lot of cold pitches. I don't have time to read them all, unfortunately. But I will tell you, when I send out an issue of podcast newsletter, I monitor every response I get because I want to make sure I didn't make a mistake or spell something wrong. So I would subscribe to the newsletter I want to pitch myself to, read it for a while, make sure I'm the right fit. And then when they send out an issue, respond to that issue and say, hey, I would love this issue. Here's why. I have a great pitch. Here's why I think it's a good fit for you. When I get an email like that, I'm like, oh, this is someone coming from my community. They read my newsletter. They support me. It's like coming to me with open arms as opposed to closed arms. Maybe you can take a screenshot. Here are a couple. I can also send this deck over, but get to know these newsletters because they're all different. Like Pod the North, that's only podcasts in Canada. You wouldn't want to pitch that if you weren't a Canadian podcast. The End is a podcast newsletter that's just about fiction, audio fiction that has ended. So can't just pitch to all of them. And then I know I kind of mentioned this before, but I would start a podcast newsletter. It's an audience you own. You can leverage it in all sorts of ways, deepen your relationship with your audience. And I suggest you all both subscribe to Nudge, the podcast, and read the Nudge newsletter. It's a great example of doing it right. He always says on the new podcast, read the rest of my newsletter. And I guarantee you, I always do. Okay. I think I'm done.
Wow. I feel like I just learned so much. This is always an area that I always feel kind of in the dark about, but you've demystified so much for me in the last 25 minutes, Lauren. Thank you so much.
Good.
This is awesome. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to go all the way up to the chat here. Okay, we've got one from Maria. Do you think the entry of AI bots and platforms like Meta will help or hurt marketing for podcasts, and why?
Good question. I think it could really help. I could talk about this for an hour and I could change my mind every 5 minutes. I am going to say, and this is scary because I don't like it and I don't let my team use it, but I think it could help indie podcasters because I think there are some steps that seem like a hurdle. They're not used to writing. You know, if there's a little something that could help them write something that they're not used to writing, I think if if that can help them with a few of their marketing tools, I think in that sense it could help. I think there's other ways that it could not help, but as when it comes to marketing, I don't know. Once again, I don't let my team use it. But I think we can do better than that. But if you're an indie podcaster, you have limited time and it's going to help you, I think that'd be good.
Awesome. While I find the next question, Lauren, do you mind throwing up that list of podcast newsletters? There were a couple of folks in the chat that were asking to see that list one more time. And yeah, this is such a gold mine of information, along with that database that you shared that's on your website. So once you throw that up, I'll grab another question here.
Okay, 1 sec. Share percent. Sorry.
And while you're sharing, I've got actually a question related to newsletters. So this is nicely aligned. Generally, how are newsletters distributed? That's coming from Creativity Inside and Out.
Do you mean what platform people are using? Is that the question?
They didn't specify, so yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. Well, I was on MailChimp for a long time. I hope that I'm answering the right question. But I find that MailChimp is more for like big companies that need a lot of links. I find that Substack is the one for creators, and there's other ones too. That's my recommendation. It's very simple. It might be too bare bones for you. I like bare bones because I need text and I don't need too many options. So it's fast, it's easy, it's clean, it's beautiful. And also it does a really good job. Like I get most of my subscriptions or my new subscribers from, you can recommend other newsletters and I can always see they're coming in from that. So people can recommend my Substack on theirs. So it's a little more like social media than a lot of the other kinds. I hope that I'm answering the right question.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And actually related to social media, this is a good segue. I have a question here from Michael Hurst. How often is appropriate to post on social media without overstepping?
Without overstepping, I would say if you are afraid you're overstepping, you are overstepping and you're wasting your time. I don't mean to be too blunt about it. I don't know, overstepping. I think people are used to seeing stuff all the time. I don't think you have to worry about overstepping, to be quite honest. I mean, I worked for a company where we posted like every hour on for a podcast. I'm serious. I mean, no one does that anymore, but I think the problem is more like, I think that that's a waste of time. I think if you're worried that you're overstepping, you're spending too much time on it. If I had an independent podcast about something I loved and I didn't want to spend a lot of time, I wanted to spend time making it and actually doing things that would make it grow. I would do maybe a post a week, maybe when there's something out, maybe check in every once in a while and see if someone tagged me, if someone mentioned me in a comment, respond to those people. But I hope that helps.
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier related to social media of like, don't try to be everywhere, like choose a couple platforms and meeting your listeners where they are. Like, I think makes a lot of sense and it's less overwhelming. No, that's great. Okay. I've got one from Jesse Keller. The question is, love the concept of audience borrowing, but as a scripted fiction show, finding it tricky to think of how to approach it. Any advice here?
Oh my gosh, let me tell you something. The fiction world is the most fun to work with. I promise you. Because I just have the most success with partnering with fiction shows. And I wonder if it's because maybe they're in more creative spaces sometimes or like more inventive worlds. I don't know what it is, but you can absolutely do all of this. Everything I'm talking about applies to fiction shows. You can also partner with nonfiction shows, but the fiction world is very specific. People want more fiction. I would say all of these things apply to that. But I would also say, remember that we contain multitudes, and to do genre matches as much as, is it only fiction matches? But like I listen to fiction and nonfiction. So there's probably nonfiction shows like Imaginary Worlds is a good example of a nonfiction podcast that you could do a fiction swap with.
Nice. Great advice there. Okay, we've got 1 minute, so I think we've got time for one more question. Question comes from 6 Degrees of Cats podcast. Love the name. The question is, do VPNs disrupt marketing analytics?
Gosh,
The great question. I don't know. What do you think, Lauren?
I don't know. Marketing analytics. I mean, that's a really good question. I guess when I think about my marketing analytics, I'm really only focused on downloads. So I guess that's the number I'm looking at. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't have a good answer for that question. I don't know enough about VPNs.
All good. And then last question from Lead with Jim. There were two sites that you mentioned. So I remember you mentioned episodes.fm. And what was the second one?
Pod.link.
Awesome. Pod.link. Amazing, Lauren. Thank you so much for all of your knowledge and sharing this with the group. I think so much of what you said has resonated here. And thank you, Captivate, for throwing those links in the chat. All right. I think we're ready to bring on Mark to talk about AI in podcasts. Mark, are you still there?
I am still here. Hello,
Yeah.
everybody. What a cracking event.
It's popping off, I think.
I almost feel bad talking about AI. It's like the least expert thing. Like everyone's so good at what they do, and I'm like, better address the trend. You know, I feel pretty bad about that, but we are going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. My camera's kicking my behind today. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm just going to have to keep doing this. Look at me. I'm just stuck there, aren't I?
We should get an avatar for you, Mark, since we're talking about AI.
Yeah, we should use that one. Like, just use that. I don't know what's going on. It does this sometimes on StreamYard. So I'm going to kind of persist with it and see what's what. But luckily, I'll be doing some demo stuff.
Nice.
So it's fine.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to get off screen and I'm going to let you take over.
Hello, everybody. What a cracking event. Oh, unbelievable. Everyone's been so good. I mean, everyone's learned so much. I always like to kind of attend these events as an attendee as well. You know, it's actually weird. Sometimes you can be in something for long enough that you sort of become a little bit, I suppose, a little bit blind to new things every now and again if you're not careful. So it's really nice to do these events and kind of soak it all in. So thank you so much to everyone that's done this. Now, Michael, you're an absolute charmer. Yeah, I'm growing my hair out a little bit and I've got a bit of more of a beard. It's a bit embarrassing, really, but thank you, buddy. We're getting there. Now, we are going to talk about AI. And what I just want to get across really quickly is I am going to show you some stuff that you should be using. And I am going to show you on Captivate, but that's because I've got a free account. I mean, it's sort of a perk. You can get other tools that do this, all right? So I don't want you to think this is just a sales thing or it's just a demo of Captivate. It's not. I want to talk to you about best practices, all right? And Danny sort of put something interesting in the comments earlier. He said, think of AI as additional intelligence, which is actually quite profound for Danny. I'm delighted by that. If anyone listens to In and Around podcasting, the show that Danny and I host, you'll know that he's full of profundities, I guess. And, you know, it's sort of an interesting concept that he's come up with there because AI, as Lauren mentioned, a lot of people steer clear of it, and rightly so, because I think it can be positioned as the silver bullet, right? And if we think back through podcasting, certainly since I've been in it, since Gaz and I got into it, 2011, 2012-ish, whenever it was, when he made me buy the mic, I think we've had trends, all right? And everything's been a silver bullet. We've seen things, there's my camera again, thank you, camera. We've seen things, let's use this camera. We've seen things come and go. We've seen things like Himalaya, where tipping was the thing. And we were going to do tips and we were going to make money from tips and everything was going to be quick and simple and we'd make a pile of money. And that was a bit of a fad. We've seen social media pick up and drop and pick up and drop. And actually, we've seen Twitter bombing. I don't know if you remember Twitter bombing at all ever. There's my camera again. I would like to thank technology for killing me. And we've seen Twitter bombing. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but basically you could paste your MP3 file into Twitter, and what it would do is it would just give you a massive peak in downloads, which was wild. It was weird. It was not very good. And these fads come and go all the time. We talk about SEO. We talk about the ability for us to quickly edit things and everything being this silver bullet game changer, right? But the truth is, nothing is a silver bullet, right? And AI is no different. All right. AI is absolutely no different. And the reason for that is that podcasting, it can never replace what we do, all right? The reason that everything that Lauren just so eloquently and expertly delivered, the reason that all of that works is because we are at the center of it. The people, the person, the human, we're at the center of it. We're looking to connect with people, and we're looking to connect those people with other people that might like what we do. And AI can't replicate that. All it can do is help us along the way. All right. So what we've got to figure out here is, right, how do we integrate AI into our workflow in such a way that it genuinely helps us? Well, let's think about it. What do we want to do to grow our show? Right. Well, we want to reach more people. We want to get more downloads. Realistically, we're actually talking about listeners. We want more listeners. All right. We want more people. And what we want to do is allow them to share and to connect these other people together so that our marketing activity that Lauren mentioned becomes almost like a flywheel. We connect me to Gaz, and then Gaz to Ben, and then Ben to Harmony, and Harmony to Danny, and we all end up listening to the same show, and we build a community, and that community gets monetized, and off we go. The problem with that, let's be completely honest, right? I'm in my home office here. I've got a day job. It's in podcasting, but I don't get that much time to podcast. So what I've got to think about is, well, what are my limits? And Dave mentioned this earlier on, right? If you've got like 4 hours to produce your podcast, but you've got expectations of it generating 10K a month and 100,000 downloads per month, things don't necessarily match up, all right? If I'm in my day job and I'm not putting in 38, 40, 45 hours a week, it's not going to deliver the results. You know, when we were a startup at Captivate, if I didn't work, then the needle wouldn't move, all right? But as a podcaster, we do it because we love it. You can see a Batwing up there. I love pop culture. I've got a Star Wars podcast. I'm going to show you it in a minute. Can I spend 40 hours a week on a Star Wars podcast? Probably not. It'd be bloody lovely. But no, I just can't do it. I just simply cannot do it. So how do I grow that show? I have to find helpers. And that's where AI can come in. All right. So as a general rule of thumb, what I want to just lay out there is this, I suppose, a mantra. I always think of AI as being able to get us 75, 80% of the way there. Whatever task we're trying to achieve, whether you're prototyping an app, whether you are generating ideas for a product name, whether you are doing something else. My camera's frozen again. Look at that. We can only get 80% of the way there. All right. We can only get 80% of the way there using AI. And the reason for that, in particular in podcasting, is because if we expect it to get us 100% of the way there, we are removed. The very thing that attracts us to our audience and our audience to us is removed. All right. So just bear that in mind. All right. Just bear that in mind. But what can it do? Well, it can help us with SEO. It can help us with actually what's working and what's not working in our podcast. So I'm going to bring up my screen. And like I said, I don't want this to look like a Captivate demo. It's not. I'm going to use Captivate to show you this, but other platforms will do some of this. All right. So I'm going to bring it up. This is Captivate. This is Spark Rebellion. I run this show with Gaz. Gaz is the talent. I don't really know what I am. I'm probably the free Captivate account more than anything, I think. And it's a nice little show. We enjoy doing it. You can see the downloads aren't crazy. 100 downloads on this episode. That's all right. We'd be quite happy with that. We're in a decent percentile of the audience. We're on hiatus at the minute. We'll be back on, I think, the 18th-ish of January to review Skeleton Crew. But the problem is, Gaz and I get busy. We work together. We work at Captivate. Sometimes we can't record, and that's fine. Sometimes we can record, but we've only got 30 minutes. All right. So what we've got to do is try and get the highest quality content out that we can in the same amount of time. We can't skimp on it. We can't just pop a quick title in there. We can't just pop a quick description in. That's not fair to the audience. All right. It's just not fair to them. So what we have to do is use AI in that way to help us. So let me show you what we do. Well, first of all, we can use AI to generate a range of ideas. All right. So in here, in Captivate, what I can do is I can come over to the episode planning screen. And what I can do is I can say, well, look, Captivate, my hosting company, whatever AI tool I use, right? You've got my analytics, you know my episode titles, and you know the performance of those episodes in the past. All right, you can spot trends. So I've only got 30 minutes, but I need to get a really good episode out. Can you generate me some ideas? And what we'll do is we'll click add episode idea. And the reason that I'm saying this is that in the past, I wouldn't have put an episode out, but consistency, as we know in growth, is key. Okay, we have to be there. We have to be there as much as we can, consistently releasing on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Monday, whatever your release schedule is. If we don't, people get a little, are these guys still publishing? Are they still around? So what I've done here is I've clicked this button using Captivate. What Captivate and the AI, and again, other tools will do this. What Captivate has done is it's looked at the trends in my episodes. All right, Marco, listen, what's working? Well, let's do a little bit more of that. Right, what's going on online around Star Wars? Let's combine those two ideas. And let's generate some concepts for you. So we've got here the rise of Star Wars collectibles. I mean, this is huge with hot toys and such. If I just click this episode idea, you can see what's happened here. And again, this has been done in like 10 seconds. I can get an episode out because of this. The title is good. The main talking points is good. They're good. Examining the growth of the collectibles market. I literally just mentioned hot toys, and that's one of the talking points that it just brought up. That was not planned. Community, conventions, nostalgia and modern collectibles. This is actually a great episode. All right. And we're also getting some guest suggestions. I can get Gentle Giant on board. I can ask them some questions. The Jedi News team. That's a great outlet. Really great outlet. And I can ask them some questions. Now, like I said, I know it sort of might feel like I'm talking about Captivate. The point is, it doesn't matter whether you use ChatGPT. It doesn't matter whether you use something else, any other AI tool that's out there for podcasting. You can do this, all right? You just have to ask it the question. Ask it the right question, all right? Here's my data. What's trending? What's working? What's not working? What's going on online in my niche? Can you create me some episode ideas? Give me some talking points and so on and so forth. Now, use Captivate. If you have Captivate, we'll convert that into an episode for you. It'll be much easier, but you can do it with other tools. Now, the reason that I like this from an AI perspective is it's not replacing you. It's actually doing what, in my view, AI should do. It's giving you a hand. It's lifting you up and it's saying, don't worry, I got that. I'll do a little bit of that heavy lifting for you. I know you're busy today. I got this. You just go and record this. It's cool. You can do this. You know what you're talking about. All right. You bloody love Star Wars. Let's just whip through it. Now, the reason that that's good is that ordinarily you would struggle with content. And what you do is you try and plan an episode out, and you would find yourself, if you got an hour, you would say, I've got 20 minutes to plan this episode out, or 15 minutes to plan this episode out. And then I've got to write all the details for it, the title and the show notes and all that sort of good stuff, and the links and everything that goes in the show notes to make it a good product. I've only really got 20 minutes to record. And that stands out to your audience, especially if it happens time and time again. So this will take that 20 minutes and just deal with it for you. All right. So that's a huge, huge thing. Really, really important piece of the AI puzzle, right? And like I said, if you use Captivate, brilliant. If you don't, that's cool. But I would urge you to think about AI in that context, all right? Let me plan my episodes, all right? Let me plan my episodes using AI. So that's a big thing. Next up, when you get two charmingly talented Star Wars nerds together and you've recorded your episode and off you go, you've created everything that you need to create, you've edited it, you've uploaded it, you're off to the races. This is the next place that AI can help you, all right? I've got a background in marketing. I've got a background in product design and brand, all right? That's sort of the intersection for me. That's why Captivate is like it is. Not everyone has that background, all right? I never thought to myself, do you know what, this is going to be brilliant. I'm going to start a Star Wars podcast. The first thing I'm going to do is not record an episode. I'm going to buy a marketing book and I'm going to learn SEO. and I'm going to learn about how transcripts work, and I'm going to learn about all this stuff. However, we're constantly told by everyone that's talking about it, SEO is vital, marketing's vital. And of course they are. Discoverability is the biggest problem that we've got in podcasting. But how do I, with 2 hours a week to put into my podcast, plan my episodes, record my episodes, edit my episodes, publish them, market them, learn about SEO, optimize them for SEO, and hope to maintain what Dave talked about earlier, that particular schedule that you have created? It's virtually impossible, all right? It is virtually impossible to do that. And this is, again, where AI can help us, okay? So let's look through this. So what we've got here, and again, other tools can do this. I've uploaded my MP3 file. Gaz probably did it, actually. He's the talent. And we've got 55 minutes of audio. And I won't run the analysis on it, but suffice to say, Captivate has analyzed this. The AI has analyzed this. And it's provided us with a transcript, which is cool. I can preview it. I can edit the transcript and so on and so forth. I can download that. And this transcript will get applied to your episode in the relevant podcasting 2.0 tag. It would be pushed to Apple using the relevant tag, podcasting 2.0 tag, which Apple now supports, which is amazing. And again, time spent. Now, why is this important? Well, transcripts are becoming more and more important, but have you got the time to go and do them? Of course not. We just don't have the time to do that. All right. So let the AI do the heavy lifting. But what the AI can then do is it can say, well, look, I've got this, which is the transcript. And guess what? All that transcript holds is every little bit of content that is within your episode. So why don't I, the AI, why not just help you out a little bit more? Why don't I give you some titles? You don't have to use them, but it's cool if you do. And I'll tell you what, I'll do the titles with SEO in mind because I'm an AI and I can think like that. You don't have to worry about learning SEO. Why don't I give you some really good show notes? Why don't I strip out all the links that you've mentioned so you can put those in your show notes? Maybe you mentioned your affiliate link. Well, let's get that in the show notes for you. Have you mentioned some companies? Cool. All right, let's get that in there as well. Chapters, dynamic ad insertion points. These are all things that the top tier podcasts are doing, right? And if you were to compare a top tier, top 1%, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 download a month podcast with most indie podcasts, outside of the audio, these are the details that separate them. These are the things that will change the perception of a brand of a podcast. Okay, if I look at a top tier podcast and I look at it and I think, wow, that's got everything in there. I might not read it, but it blooming out, it looks good. That must be pro. And then I look at a podcast that's just got episode 12, a Star Wars podcast. And then I've got the description. In this episode, Mark and Gary talk about Star Wars. And I see that versus the Jedi News stuff, this real well done piece of kit. What's the brand perception? What's the brand perception? It's like walking into a restaurant and seeing dirty tables, seeing dirty floor, seeing dirty uniforms. The food might be amazing. It might be super clean, but the brand perception counts. And we're all fighting for attention. We're all fighting for audience. So every little bit of perception counts. Okay? But luckily, this is how we can use AI to our benefit. I generated my assets earlier, like Blue Peter, for anyone in the UK. This is, here's one I generated earlier. And my computer's playing a little bit of a game with me. Let me just refresh this. Not having much tech luck today, am I? There we go. Yeah, it's just my computer being a little fussy. So what you can see is that we've got a range of titles that the AI has generated. All right. And these are all SEO friendly. They're all specific to this episode. What it's done is it's looked through the transcript and said, well, this looks like it could be contentious. Maybe that'll get a few clicks. We had the word cancellations in there. Well, maybe that could be a little clicky as well. And you can see this with the Henry Cavill one. These are all things that are trending at the moment. All right. Things that are happening right now in the Star Wars universe. And the AI knows that. It knows which bits of the transcript to focus on. All right. And we just use that. We just add that to the episode. Easy as that. Nice and simple. We've also got an intro, which I'll not talk about too much. That's mainly used for YouTube, to be completely honest with you. Mainly used for YouTube. But what's interesting is most AI tools will only give you one of everything. And I'm just not sure that that's that good. Like, if we want the AI to get us 80% of the way there, what if it just sets off a little bit wrong in the wrong direction and gets us 80% of the way there, but there is the wrong there? So what we tend to do is, I always recommend, again, if you're using different AI tools, you can do this with them. With your show notes and such, get a couple of different suggestions. Just get a couple of different versions. Just get a couple of different options that you can use, because doing that will allow you to, number one, train the AI a little bit more. Okay, he keeps choosing that one. And that maybe we should write a little bit more like that in the future, because he does keep choosing that. So, okay, let's go with that one. Yeah, okay, we'll just do more like that in the future. So the job of the AI gets easier and quicker and better results as well, okay? So that's the next thing that I'd suggest is, with your show notes, doesn't matter what tool you're using, ask it for more than one suggestion on everything, but in show notes in particular, because these are an SEO goldmine, especially when you consider what we call the long tail of SEO, where people search really specific things, okay? The next way that I would use AI, and that I'd recommend that we start to think about this, is scannability. You know, when you're sort of deciding on a podcast, you will very often think to yourself, right, the title's the kicker. And it is, don't get me wrong, the title is quite important, very important, in fact. And that will be generally the thing that pushes the click. All right, yeah, I'm going to try that episode. But when I'm driving along, I've got, Apple CarPlay on or whatever. Sometimes the titles aren't great. Sometimes the titles simply just do not parlay what we're talking about in much depth. So what we tend to do is we then think about the description and the takeaways. And in particular, I want to be able to open up an episode and quickly see what I'm going to get from this episode. What are the outlines of this? All right. So ask your AI to generate some takeaways in bulleted format, so that they can be scanned, they can be viewed really quickly, they can be added to your show notes really quickly at the click of a button. But in particular, they can be used to inform your chapters, to inform the flow of the show, and to give people almost a path through the show. Because Laura mentioned it earlier, all right? Here's a bit of a secret. There will, as Laura mentioned, that you'll get a spike in downloads from undertaking certain podcast activity and marketing activity, but not everyone will like the show. Not every listener likes all of the episodes. Maybe they tune in for one segment or two segments, or they hate the fluff that you think you're hilarious at the beginning, and they hate the fluff at the end that you think you're hilarious at as well. They just don't find you funny. They're here for the Star Wars news. So let them know what they're going to get from this episode, all right? Which then leads into something that Dave Jackson's just mentioned in the chat as well. The chapters, all right? Chapters are becoming more and more prominent, all right? Apple supports them. Pocket Cast, Spotify, Overcast supports them. Chapters are a way for people to skip through your episode, all right? If I've got 10 minutes to listen to this episode and all I want to know is, oh my gosh, is Superman going to be in Star Wars? Boom. All right, we'll do that. We'll click on that one. 50 minutes, 22 seconds in, it jumps me straight there. The problem is, this is a pen. And this is how I used to create chapters back in the day. When I say back in the day, I mean like 6 months ago. I used to just go through my audio, and as Gaz and I were recording or whatever else, I'd go through the audio either when we were editing or, as I said, when we were sort of going through the recording itself, and I would just make a timestamp note. The problem with a timestamp note is that I've got to add the intro, I've got to add the outro, maybe I edit some stuff out, bits of coughing, bits of bits of and actually the timestamps move. It's a royal pain in the neck, but this is where AI can do the heavy lifting. And as with everything, it's all about experience. All right. If I give my listeners a great experience, click this link to go to this part of the audio, that's a way better experience than 15 seconds forward, 15 seconds forward, 15 seconds forward. All right. So it's all about the brand experience. It's all about the podcast experience. And similarly, AI can do the work on ad marker suggestions for you as well. I'll not go into that in too much depth. Also ask your AI whether it's ChatGPT, Capture, whatever else you use, ask it to pull out the links. What links did you mention? And just stick them in a bulleted list. It's just easy to scan. How many times do we say there's a link in the show notes? Like, okay, where is that link? Well, there it is. We mentioned the companies, and then we go down and we talk about SEO. All right. So down here, and you'll have this on your podcast publishing platform. The SEO description. So really important when someone searches. Laura mentioned earlier she'll search for, I think it was it Player FM or Pocket Cast? I forget. She'll go Player FM, True Crime Podcast, latest episodes, whatever the search term was. The bit that appears under the clickable title is this SEO description. So it's got to be good, but who's got time to learn SEO? I'm not going to pay $97 for some dodgy course from a terrible guru. So what I may as well do is forget about it. I don't want to be an SEO expert. What I will do is let the AI do the work for me because it's fine. That's what it's good at, is that stuff. All right. And guess what? Doing this SEO is way better than the SEO we were doing before, which is nothing. All right. So we can use AI to our benefit. Use AI to our benefit. Now, brilliant. The problem, though, is that, well, people come to my podcast for me and for Gaz. And AI is just AI. It just sounds a bit AI. Like, there are detectors now. There are people doing like college degrees that are now having to run their work through AI detectors because AI writes in a certain way. So, massive tip that I want to give you is train your AI to talk like you. Now, again, you can do this with ChatGPT. You can do it with anything else, but we've built it into the settings in Captivate just because it's, why would you mess? So what I would suggest you do is you always do this in your podcast settings or whether you're in ChatGPT or whatever. There's something wrong with my browser here. I think Safari's having a little bit of a, I don't think it's liking StreamYard too well. There we go. So inside the podcast settings, which is where you set your name and your title and all this good stuff that comes, you've got this tab. When it eventually works, Safari is really not, I don't know what's going on with StreamYard and Safari. Let me stop the share and then we will start the share again. Technology will never catch on, I assure you. Right, well, give me 1 sec. I just need to. I need to just refresh this connection with StreamYard. Give me a second, lovelies. Yeah, it's just not liking it. It's not even sharing the screen now. All right, hang on. I'm sorry about this. Technical issues. It's now finally decided to do it. Thank you, StreamYard. There we go. Ah, wonderful. Okay, so you don't have to use Captivate for this. You can use any other AI platform, but do not skip the notion of training your AI to talk as close as possible to how you talk. You know, it's writing the show notes and the titles and whatever else. It needs to sound like you. All right, as close to you as possible. So what we've done in Captivate, and again, you can fire some of these things into ChatGPT, but we've created a couple of pre-built personas here in Captivate. You can do something that's simple and fun or in-depth and formal. I mean, two ends of the spectrum. But the power is, of course, in the customization here. So again, you could use ChatGPT. All right, write the following things, write my show notes, write my titles in an informal tone, using the first person voice with a little bit of sarcastic humor and some simple complexity. All right. So do that. All right. Set that up in whatever AI you use, because that's how you keep it close to you. That's how you keep it sounding like you, keeping it on brand. And then what I can do is, if I wanted to, I could actually add some URLs. So if I had written a blog post, I could add a URL to allow the AI to analyze that and say, okay, well, Marco writes in this writing style. Just maybe we should write like that as the AI for Captivate. All right. So I can't tell you how important it is for AI to supplement your thought process, for AI to give you a leg up, but to do it in your voice, to do it as part of your team. All right. And as Danny mentioned, which I love, I think it's great, additional or additive intelligence. So fantastic. Now that's all I'm going to do. I'm conscious of time. We can answer some questions on AI. We can answer some questions on all sorts of different things. Because I think it's a big subject, but just get those things right. To summarize, use it to plan your episodes, give it some data based on your analytics, and ask it to look what's happening in your industry. Ask it to choose talking points for you. Number 2, give it some transcripts. Allow it to analyze your audio and say, give me some good SEO friendly and some clickable titles, some in-depth 3 options of show notes. Give me the chapters, pull out the company names, give me the URLs that I mentioned in there so that you can build these quality show notes. And then last but not least, make it sound like you. Train it, teach it how you talk to your audience. All right, really important. Harmony, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And Gaz, actually, if you probably bring Gary on as well, just because I've talked about him so much, people.
Mark, this has been awesome. The magic of the generate AI episode assets portion of the platform is just amazing. My mind is blown. I'm like so inspired by what you've been talking about the last 30 minutes.
Thank you. That's a team effort as well, the Captivate team. I always get like the nice comments because I'm the face, despite the camera not working. But it's the team, Ben and Kieran and everyone else, the irony of that timing. Ben and Gaz and the team, like they are behind this. It's fantastic work.
Yeah, it's a good talk there, dude. And as usual, and one thing that's cool about the AI stuff within, as you said, not just Captivate, but just in general, is I would urge people to just have a play around with it, because there's no need to dive in like full whack. No need to go full steam, yeah? And just bog yourself down with all that stuff, because it can be like its own beast to tame if you don't sort of get yourself into it and slowly get into it. So, yeah, as Mark said, this is not a promo for Captivate a little bit, but the tools that we have, yeah, it's almost like that little magic wand sometimes, where you just need to get something out quickly. You're in a bit of a rush. You don't have much time to dedicate. This is like, yeah, that little magic wand to get you 80% of the way there. So yeah, it's good. Good talk, dude. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So Mark, there's been a bunch of questions in the chat, but one that kept kind of creeping up was from Shelly, I think, who asked it, is AI on Captivate an additional cost? So can you just kind of break down how that works with the subscription a bit?
Yeah, of course. That's a really good question. So the cost in any AI is essentially the computing power for the transcription. So we pay for that and we just pass that cost on. So it works out that for every hour of transcription, you pay $1 and you buy that in chunks of 5 or whatever denomination that you want. And you pay for that transcription at $1 an hour. So if you've got, say you buy $5 worth of credit, you got 5 hours and you've got a 30-minute episode, you use 30 minutes of that transcription. All the AI assets are generated from that, so you don't pay again for that. All the episode ideas, everything else is included with that transcription service as well. So, but yeah, it's essentially however much transcription you want to buy, it works out $1 an hour bought in blocks of 5, 10, 15, and you can buy it annually and save a little bit as well. So it's just a cost that we pass on, which is just the computing power, really.
Awesome. Great clarification. Awesome. Let's see here, Gary. I'm seeing Sadaf has a question. This is a great one. How do we train AI to talk like us if we have multiple podcasts on Captivate, as in multiple hosts?
That is a great question, actually. Sadaf's been full of fantastic questions today, actually. So props on that. The tone of voice training is set at podcast level. So if you remember earlier, I clicked. It was a little bit awry because it's when my computer was having a little bit of a breakdown. But it's inside podcast settings. So if you imagine you at the top of your Captivate account, and I'm Mark, and I've got a golf show, I've got a Batman show, I've got a Star Wars show, I've got a show about podcasting. The settings for the tone of voice live at that level. I've got tone of voice for the golf show, tone of voice for the Star Wars show, tone of voice for this, tone of voice for that. So it's inside podcast settings, which is for that very reason, because there's no other way to do it, really.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Let's see here. I also see one from Rika Nyman. The question is, we're hosting some shows on Captivate in Finnish. Will I be able to use Spark AI, for example, for episode ideas, or does it only work in English at the moment?
We've had that a couple of times, and we've actually, I'll just be completely straight with you, we've actually purposely not done it in any other language. That said, it's AI and it understands all languages. So I've genuinely, Gaz, I don't know if you have, I mean, you're Welsh, aren't you? Half Welsh. I would just try it. I would literally just try it. I would just press the button and just see. Yeah, very happy. I mean, yeah, give it a whirl. We purposely did it English only just because, you know what it's like when you're rolling the product out, you got to deal with one thing at a time.
Yes.
I would just press the button and see what happens. I really would.
Yeah, I think it would be fine. Just as you said, just the nature of AI. It's not a localized colloquial thing. It's a international tool, so it should be fine.
Nice.
Yeah, we should kick the tires on that.
Let's see here. I see one more question, and then Gary, please jump in too if you're seeing any additional. This one came from Misfit Preachers. So the question is: to be sure I understand, is it fair to say that Captivate's AI tool is much more effective because it already has our data and pre-frames the specific questions?
When it comes to the episode planning, yeah, that was a purposeful thing that we did, because we've got the ecosystem is end to end. If your AI is built into your hosting platform, the ecosystem is end to end. Karate chop, stop. And the reason for that is that we can analyze the data. We can ask the AI to go out and search for things. Go and search what's happening in the niche and so on and so forth. But because we've got the past data, we've got all of your old episode titles, we've got all of your episode descriptions, your show notes and stuff. We can meld that data together to be way more accurate. So yeah, it's really effective in the episode planning, really effective in that stage. And I think that's honestly probably the most transformative part for me. Like the asset stuff is good, but other platforms really do that as well. Some don't pull the links out, some don't do X, Y, and Z, but generally speaking, the assets from a transcript are being done in 10 different places. The episode idea generation, where you are looking at things that work, like the history is the best teacher, isn't it? So if I can look at what works and do more of it, that's the real interesting part. And because it's in 5 seconds, not a morning's worth of research and work, it's just so useful. Gaz and I use it pretty much for every episode. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I would say so. I don't think there's an episode. I think just, for all of our podcasts now, I think just spin up the transcripts, get the AI stuff. And I think it's really important as well. You mentioned it a couple of times is this thing about getting you from 0 to 80%, 75%, whatever it is. And after you get into the habit of doing that with every episode, you start to have some muscle memory around picking the stuff out that works for your podcast. So instead of having to sort of go through every bloody sentence and everything that it spits out, which can be useful, but in the broader scheme of things, it's you start to learn how the AI works for your show because it has that data and that stuff. So yeah, a question here from Michael Hurst. I've got another question. Says the summary side of it, is that more for YouTube and show notes for the Audible stuff? So yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's I use that in a couple of different ways. I'll either use that and drop it in above my show notes and then put the show notes in, or it's for the YouTube summary or it's a tighter version of the show notes that can be scanned a little bit quicker. That's the way that we structure that, which I just find useful as that first intro paragraph. It's like, oh, here's what we're going to be doing. And it's actually the same, Michael, with the keywords. I don't know if you noticed in the SEO section, but keywords are deprecated, and they've been deprecated in Apple Podcasts for a long time, and certainly in Google search and so on, because they were like spam city. But as we know, keywords are still a thing on YouTube. So that's why we generate those. So you can just drop them in there and off you go. So yeah, that's a good question. But yes, you're absolutely right.
Yes.
I don't think we have any more questions for Mark, unless anyone wants to fire any last minute ones before his camera packs up.
That's my next job, is just going to set fire to my camera.
I think we're good, Mark.
And I am an AI. Yes. That's why my tolerance for beer when I see you at events is so low. We can't take it, as we know. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate that. Thank you to everyone. It's been an absolutely cracking event. Just Harmony, thank you so much for doing it and for setting it up, and Gary and Ben on our side.
No,
Beautiful.
so
All of you.
lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Big shout out to Ben, Gary, and Danny on the Captivate team. It's lovely working with you guys and excited to do more in the future.
For sure. Yeah. Cool. So I don't think there's anything else going on in the chat. We got some closing comments probably. One thing that's popped up quite a lot though is, will this be available online afterwards for people to go back and watch? Absolutely, it will be. It will be on the Captivate YouTube channel, so you can go and check that out. And we'll also post some social stuff out for people to go and recap. It will be up there, so you can see our faces smiling back at you. And on a serious note, all the educational stuff tonight has been very cool. So Harmony, I think we will close it there. Thank you, and to you and all the guys at Adobe. It's been awesome to tag team on this one.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the collaboration. And thank you all for the thoughtful questions too. These are such great questions. It's wonderful to see that there's such a vibrant community here supporting one another. So it's so wonderful to connect with you all. And I guess, Gary, what's the best way to connect with the team at Captivate? Is it finding you all on LinkedIn, or what's the best way?
Yeah, you can find us. I think the team are all on LinkedIn. You can also... you can find us on the usual socials. So if you go to the Captivate account on Twitter, for example, or X, whatever it is, you'll find all the podcasts in chat on there, and we all follow that account and so on. So you can find us. You can find us on there. So yeah. And what about you and the Adobe team?
Yeah. So find us on podcast.adobe.com. You can reach out to us via support channels or our community forum. You can find me on LinkedIn. So yeah, reach out to us on any of those channels.
Indeedy. Cool. And on that note, thank you very much once again, everybody. We will definitely do this again. So stay tuned. Make sure you are subscribed to Captivate's newsletters, etc. The guys over at Adobe. And we will see you again soon. So thank you very much, and have a good one, everyone. Keep podcasting. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.